Try to get everybody in their seats. We are at that order of bills still on third reading and final passage. The next bill for our consideration is, and before I do that, I just want to say we're only on the fourth bill on third reading. We have 11 amendments on the rest of these bills, which is what we do, right? And we kind of jumbled second into third. But I just would urge you, if you want to get to any general file, that you make your comments brief when you bring amendments and then when you debate the amendments. So with that, the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 119.
House Bill 119, sponsored by Representative Penn. Medical prescriptions, off-label purposes, an act relating to professions and occupations being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I move third reading amendment number 1 of House Bill 119 for your favorable consideration. So on page 3, where it lists which prescribers are included in this bill, I was approached before this bill even went to committee by the Optometric Association, and they wanted to be included in this bill as well. And so that's what this amendment does, is add optometrists to the list of prescribers. And so if there's no comment, I would move the bill, or the amendment, please. Thank you.
Chairman Zwanitzer, for your first time.
Perhaps just a question, and I'm sorry, I just haven't had time to research it, but I remember from my former days on the Optometry Practice Act that we only have certain prescription abilities for optometrists. Isn't that correct? But if it's not, I feel like their current Practice Act only allows them to prescribe certain drugs, and so I'm not honestly sure how that interacts with this amendment, and maybe some more clarification on to make sure that's congruent.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody their second time? Sponsor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if you'll remember that we added on previous amendment to this bill within the scope of practice, and therefore I still feel that this is reasonable. Optometrists prescribe eye drops, and some of those eye drops may be off-label, steroid drops and things like that. So I still feel this is reasonable. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 119 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 119 has been adopted. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I move third reading amendment number 2 of House Bill 119 for your favorable consideration. So in this, pages 4 and 5, in previous amendment, we added in the consent phrase.
Everybody be quiet, we're talking too much.
This would take out the 2 words "in writing." So we're still requiring consent, we're just removing the words "in writing." And my reasoning for this is, given the amount of off-label prescriptions that are prescribed, and given the fact that we are virtually required to use electronic medical records, requiring a written consent on all of these drugs would pose a great burden on a lot of the facilities. Most of these smaller facilities are not going to have capabilities for patients to provide electronic signatures, and therefore what this would mean is creation of a form that would have to be printed out, be barcoded to include the patient's identifying information, have the patient sign it, and then scan it back into their chart. This would be happening in many clinics many times a day, and therefore the burden is great. As I said, consent is still included in this, and it's very simple to include written consent include that consent was obtained within their medical record.
Representative Clouston, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our patients sign lots of things electronically. If we're going to let someone take an off-label drug, they need to be aware of what they are taking, and they need to be able to talk to their physician about this. This amendment, which I put on so I could feel comfortable supporting this bill in committee, came from the Wyoming Trials Association.
You're not supposed to name an association.
From a group of lawyers. So without this amendment, I will no longer support this bill.
Representative Brown, and just a reminder for those that weren't in here, we need to be as brief as we can to get to general file today. So, Representative Brown, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just out of curiosity, my thought on this is going back to practicum. If we don't have it in writing, how do we verify that this was actually given to them? If we don't put it in writing, we can just say, then it can be verbal. It can be, sure, I gave it to him, and then it's his word against my word. I don't know how you put it in there unless it's just charting. At that point, I still feel like that would be considered in writing, and I'm not sure how this actually goes into practice unless you actually have it in writing. Maybe on your second time up, if you can describe that, being a practitioner, it would help me. That's my only concern on this one.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Yin for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on this amendment, I just want to remind everybody that you can prescribe off-label drugs now. You don't have to require informed consent. The informed consent amendment from the standing committee that was put on from the committee is only if the physician is worried that they will get disciplinary conduct from either the licensing board or their employer. So if it's just the normal course of prescribing an off-label drug, they don't have to get informed consent. The informed consent only gives them that immunity from their employer or that last licensing board. If they just normally want to prescribe an off-label drug, like a pediatrician prescribing something to a child where it's the normal course of one of the many drugs that are prescribed off-label, there's no reason to give informed consent. So I would ask you to not remove the informed consent for the immunity provision that's in this statute. Against the amendment.
Representative Ottman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was going to be in agreement with the last representative until the last couple sentences. Now I'm not sure. So what I would like to say is that I am on and for the amendment and for the bill. Every time that I go to the dentist, which isn't that often, but or doctor, just for regular things, most of the charting and things that they do is all online. We don't have any paper at all. They take everything either on a recorder or they put it in the computer. So there isn't anything that's actually written by hand. So it's all recorded, it's all there for a record, and it's all there to be looked at by anybody that needs to. Thank you.
Anybody else for your first time? No. Anybody for their second time before the bringer of the amendment? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so I guess what I might see is the difference between the patient giving written consent and the provider writing that they gave consent. And so for the patient to provide written consent would require them to sign something themselves. So a lot of facilities, it would take a piece of paper, but once again, we use electronic medical records, so that creates a process. If somebody has an iPad, some facilities might have an iPad that they can sign, that would be a piece of cake. So we're still requiring that the prescriber is writing in the chart that consent was obtained. It's just taking out that the patient is giving the written consent. And if there's no other questions, I would call for the question.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 119 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. The chair is in doubt. All those in favor, please rise. Please stay still. All those opposed, please stand. Less than 32. Third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 119 has been adopted. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I bring third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 119 and ask for your favorable consideration. So members, the bill is a bill about immunity. So it provides immunity for disciplinary action from a licensing board and their employer. In committee, we heard testimony from folks who were aggrieved by their employer. So they said that their employer fired them for prescribing certain drugs off-label. Get it, fine. I'm okay with granting that immunity. No one, not a single person, testified that the licensing board disciplined them. All 3 licensing boards came to us and said they issued no disciplinary actions for anybody during the pandemic for drugs related to COVID-19. The issue with keeping licensing board immunity in there is that it makes a dangerous situation where the group that polices themselves, so doctors are the ones that sit on the Board of Medicine, they're the ones that police other doctors. And so you get the situation where this one specific part of medicine gets permanent immunity from essentially consumer safety, protecting us to make sure that doctors live up to the high standards that doctors need to live up to. And so I urge you to adopt this amendment to make sure that we can still keep everyone safe on the licensing board's perspective. And then, you know, frankly, I'm fine with the rest of the bill because I think the employer protection is useful and I'm happy to support that part. But I do urge you to adopt the amendment.
Representative Trujillo for your first time.
I would just like to state that maybe we didn't hear all testifying due to the fact that we let agencies and organizations talk before the general public and our time was cut short.
Representative Penn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would be on and against this amendment. Representative Yin is correct in that there was testimony that no licenses were actually revoked for this. They did, however, say that there were investigations. I would move you to look to page 4, where it says that prescribers shall not face any adverse action solely on the basis for this being an off-label prescription. And so we're not, that's what this bill is talking about, that there would be adverse action taken or not taken strictly because it was an off-label prescription. We're not talking about if negligence occurred. We're not talking about other things. We're talking about that there can be no adverse outcomes or threats based solely upon the fact that it was an off-label prescription. We have had situations in this state where there were threats or warnings, might be a nicer term, from these entities that oversee the practice of medicine and nursing, providers and prescribers were warned that if you proceed with this line of treatment, then we will likely come and investigate you and consider taking your license. Thank you.
Representative Slagle for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment. I received a letter from a doctor friend of mine that he got during COVID-19. And basically what it said is, if you aren't following the protocols of the licensing or the boards that oversee medicine, then the statement I'm going to read to you comes right after that, not following their protocol, therefore may be subject a physician to disciplinary actions, including suspension or revoking of their medical license. And it repeats that phrase at least twice in this letter that I received from my doctor friend. I stand on and against this amendment. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the bringer of the amendment? Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So again, members, you know, I think those threats mainly come from employers. And again, which is why I'm satisfied with the employer immunity. I think that's fine. A licensing board is our consumer protection to make sure that we aren't being harmed by members of their own profession that are acting unprofessionally within their body of work. And so again, this is responsive to a specific subset of medications. Got it. But again, to reiterate, the licensing board still took no action on any physician or other prescriber that issued those prescriptions. So I don't want us to be overly reactionary where we react on something where literally there was no problem that we are reacting against. So again, the employer part's fine, got it, I'm okay. Licensing board is a dangerous part to tick the immunity part onto. So I would ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 119, please say aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 119 has failed. Division having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 3, please rise. Recount the whole deal. Stay still. All those opposed, please stand. Third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 119 has failed 29 to 32. Representative Brown, Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully withdraw third reading amendment number 4.
Third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 119 has been withdrawn. House Bill 119, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Elliman. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrop. Oakley. Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Aye.
Are there any changes? Byron, no to aye. Further changes? Larson? JT? No to aye. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 44 aye, 18 no.
House Bill 119, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 119 has passed the House. Privilege, Representative Western,
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
please.
Thank you very much, folks. So there's an awesome tradition called Camo in the Capitol, and this is the 6th year of it doing it. And these are sportsmen from all across the state. These are our anglers, these are our hunters who are come down here and engage in citizen lobbying. They come from all the counties. So they've got a reception tonight at 6:30. Feel free to swing by where there will be pulled bear sliders, which, trust me, they are good. I promise they are. So let's just stand up and give our sportsmen a round of applause.
Welcome, hunters of Wyoming, to the House. The next bill for our, we got another privilege. Privilege,
Thank you, Mr.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to recognize someone, a neighbor and a constituent from the great junction of Hoback, Orion Hatch, a good friend of mine. Please stand up. Welcome to the House.
Hey! Yeah, I spaced Representative Byron's name for a minute, so it happens to all of us. So welcome to the House. So the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 124. Reading clerk will.
House Bill 124, sponsored by Representative Summers. Electricity generation, taxation, an act relating to taxation, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
There are amendments. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move and bring to you third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 124 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, what we're doing here is just trying to levelize the taxes on our generation, making solar equal to wind. I'm adding hydroelectric into that mix. Just to give you an idea about the hydroelectric generation in Wyoming, it's the 4th largest generation capacity that we have in Wyoming. Of course, we all know that coal is 73%, wind is now up to 19%, and then there's natural gas, and hydropower brings in about 2% of all the generation we have in Wyoming. We have a solar farm. Actually, it's really close to where I live. It came online in 2018, and it produces only about 92 megawatts, whereas with hydro, we produce 3 times that amount right now. And we've had hydro in Wyoming for about 70 years. And members, I refer you to your budget data book, if you look towards the back on page 149 or something like that, it gives you a lot of those funds that we have set up to maintain all of these reservoirs, because we're responsible for a lot of the maintenance and operation and the other things to keep those reservoirs in operation. So if you add some of those up, I didn't add them all up, I only added up half of them, and we have about $42 million that we are expending or reserving for maintenance on these reservoirs. So we're not getting any tax revenue off of the hydroelectric power, but we are expending quite a sum of money for the maintenance of the facilities where they're generated. So what I'm trying to do is just even up this a little bit, throw that into the mix so that we can get a little bit of revenue off of hydroelectric as well as solar and wind. Thank you.
Representative Newsom, Chairman Newsom, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question about the ownership of the plants that create this hydroelectric power. I know we have one in my county, in my district, and I believe that it is federally owned and federally administered. And I'm wondering if we can tax that energy sector.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The answer to that is no. 14 of our dams are controlled by the Bureau of Reclamation. And you can't tax the federal government, as far as I'm aware, in any other way, shape, or form. So I'm not sure exactly why we would, I just don't understand. I mean, I'm all for, I just find it very interesting to be professional about it, that we would increase more taxation on other industries in this body.
Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. On and against the amendment. You know, I think some of those dams have leases and a number of other things. And the way I've read the statutes for this wind and solar, you'd be exempt. The federal government would be exempt anyway. So I'm not really sure what he's trying to accomplish, the good bringer of this amendment, but I'm on and against it.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the concept here, but I'm starting to worry about tax creep. We've added one industry in, and pretty soon we'll add another one, and another one, and pretty soon we're just picking places to tax. That's all my concern. I'll let the bringer of the amendment address that.
Vice Chairman Larson.
So I really find this conversation interesting, and I think that it's worthy of some consideration. I think that the point brought up that we've got this hydroelectric generation that's not being taxed, and so then who's benefiting from that? Well, somehow that electricity being generated from a federal entity is getting to a utility. And then that utility, I believe, and that's, I don't know that I have all the pieces of the puzzle together, but then that utility is distributing that, and this, you know, then the argument would be that the tax would be passed on to the users. Folks, I think to the good chairman of Minerals, as he's been involved with energy, as we look at our tax base, and most of the commodities that we produce here are used in some way of generating energy. And so if we're going to use these other energy sources to displace the commodity that we generate revenue from, then perhaps we need to be looking at the generation as a source of taxation overall. And so maybe we need to rethink this whole tax structure on our energy a little bit. And I don't know that we'll get it decided today in this amendment, but I think that we've got to take into consideration this whole enchilada here and look at how we, as we try to redo this whole energy structure to include new and old, and to make sure that it's what benefit is it to the state really should be our question, and it can't just be jobs. It's got to be revenue back into the state somehow. So I really appreciate this amendment coming forth. You know, I don't know that it has all the votes to get it passed, but I think it is absolutely a critical conversation that we need to have as we look at redesigning the tax structure of the state based on the energy sources that we have in use. So I commend the bringer of this, and I also really am on and for this bill. I think it's a great bill.
Anyone else for your first time? Anyone else for your first time? All right, anyone for your second time prior to the bringer? All right, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for information, there are 6 privately owned hydroelectric power plants in the state of Wyoming. They've been generating for 70 years, some of them, and there's no tax implications for any of those. So what this would do is try to level the playing field so that everybody gets some benefit from it. And the state of Wyoming is putting a lot of money into these dams just for maintenance, upkeep, and risk management. So it's a good opportunity to recoup a small amount of that money. We're never going to get $42 million from these small power producers, but it will offset a little bit and just try to make it fair. I urge an aye vote on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We are voting on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 124. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Amendment number 1, third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 124 has failed. We are back on the bill. The division being called. All those in favor, please stand. All those, you can sit down, and all those opposed, please stand. That has failed on a 26-33 vote. House Bill 124, having been read My mistake, I didn't see it. We do have one more amendment. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move third reading, amendment number 2 to House Bill 124 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, so because we have a bill in front of us that adds a new tax, I wanted to make sure that we all agree on the method of taxation and whether that's an appropriate method of taxation. Because the bill itself doesn't really do that because it's an existing statute. It's adding it to already existing wind tax that exists. So it doesn't really tell you how it's charged. It's charged on a per megawatt basis. So that always sat wrong to me because on a per megawatt basis, the price of electricity can vary from up to $100 in difference, right? So if a company is selling electricity at a lower price, the per megawatt cost is going to be a higher percentage of the selling price that they're given. So technically, it's like a higher percentage tax when the cost of power is low. But when the cost of power is high, it doesn't feel as hard because you're being able to sell power on the grid for quite a bit more money, so $1 doesn't feel as bad. The amendment, what the amendment does is it changes it from a per megawatt charge to essentially a sales tax. So it will depend on how much the power provider is selling the power for and what the earnings they get back on. And so it's a 3.5% tax. I looked at how other states tax electricity generation. Some of them do a percentage. So the state to the west of us that makes really tasty potatoes, for example, has a 3 on solar, a 3 on wind, and a 3.5 on solar. This just creates the same kind of choice on deciding what type of taxation you want. So I ask for your favorable consideration.
Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. On and against this amendment, I think that would be a different bill for a different time. This is simply adding to the wind. It's a totally different tax structure being proposed in this amendment. And so I'm on and against it.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on and against the amendment. And I'm not quite decided on the bill. I'm leaning no because, you know, when we talk about taxes, and we've done a lot of talking about taxes, which is fine. We should have conversations like that. But I think we need to think about the message that we're sending from Wyoming, both to the people who are thinking about bringing business here and to the people who have business here. Now, if you ever had a business and you had to sign and make a payroll, you know how much these incremental costs matter. They matter to your business, but they also matter to the people who help you make your business go. So while in some ways there's the equity issue, I see that, but I think the larger picture has to do with where we are going to be in the next 10 years, given a decision today. I'd really ask people to think about that and vote no on this amendment and no on the bill.
Anyone else for your first time? First time, seeing no one headed to the mics. Second time? And to the bringer, Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, members, again, if we're going to talk about adding a new tax to our tax code, let's at least consider the method of taxation. Thank you.
With that, we are voting on third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 124. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 124 has failed. House Bill 124 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellenman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washit? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Aye.
Are there any changes? Nicholas? No to aye. Further changes? Bear? No to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 34 aye, 28 no.
House Bill 124, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 124 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 126.
House Bill 126, sponsored by Representative Crago. Trespass, removal of trespasser. An act relating to crimes and offenses being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading Amendment 1 to House Bill 126 and ask for your favorable consideration. I want to make sure that this bill does not abridge the right of the people to peaceably assemble a government to address grievances, and that is the reason for the addition of subsection D of this section shall not prevent, deny, or abridge the right of the people to peaceably assemble. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, and let's just be clear about what the amendment does. It actually takes the guts out of the bill and replaces it with a provision of our Wyoming Constitution, which, if you want to read it, Section 21 talks about the right of petition and peaceable assembly. We cannot abridge those rights. We already know that. That's part of our Constitution. This bill does not intend to do that, nor will it do that. You will still have the right to peaceably assemble wherever you wish to go. And so I'd ask for a no vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Oakley for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, along with what the good country lawyer just said, that's what I thought too. So we're just adding a statement of the Wyoming Constitution, also in the United States. So I just don't see the relevance. If you could, if the bringer could explain in what way, just stating that we have the right to assemble addresses a problem with the bill or is related, I'd appreciate it.
Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Concerning relevance, we have had a number of issues at public meetings on public property where heavy-handed authorities have stopped people from being able to testify, have barred their entrance, and that is why this is relevant. On and for the amendment.
Representative Stivar for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On for the amendment. You know, with this bill, what's the unintended consequences going to be when we have people push the issue on this at school board meetings and other meetings? You know, that's the problem. On for the amendment, against the bill.
Anybody else for their first time? Second time, Representative Crago for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if we want to go back a couple days on the amendment, but let's go back to what we talked about the first time we talked about this particular bill. We're not changing the law. This is already the law. We're just making it easier so our constituents back home can find it. If we were changing the law, we'd be having a different discussion, and I would be willing to entertain that discussion, but that's not what we're doing. We're just putting the existing common law in the green books so the people back home can know what it actually is without having to pay one of us lawyers to tell them. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish with this on and against the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for their second time before the bringer? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we're not changing the law, then why are we running a bill? I want to make sure that people have the right to appear at school board meetings and other public places without their free speech rights being abridged. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 126 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 126 has failed. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. Count them. All those opposed, please rise. More than 18. Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 126 has failed. House Bill 126, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Elleman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? I'm sorry. Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Allemand, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 57 aye, 5 no.
House Bill 126, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 126 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 145.
House Bill 145, sponsored by Representative Washut. Disclosure of sensitive information, law enforcement, an act relating to the administration of government being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So today I will move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 145 and ask for your favorable consideration. In front of you guys today is just some sideboards. As we were having our discussion on this bill, one of the concerns that I had was, okay, let me back up. Under our current statute, Homeland Security cannot be informed about anything that's going on in the law enforcement realm because they can't bring any of the, I guess you would say, records to Homeland Security. And that's a problem because let's say if there were power transmission stations that are getting run into and they're like, man, this is a security issue. Homeland Security needs to know about it. We can't tell them that right now, which I think obviously that needs to be fixed. What we don't want to see happen is a free-for-all with a federal agency that we just give them a full ability to go into all of our records of our state, our criminal records of our state. So today I'm bringing this amendment that would just say the Office of Homeland Security shall not disseminate criminal identification and intelligence information received from the division to any other persons or entities. This is tightening it up, putting a little bit of sideboard action on it, just so we kind of keep this understanding of it's permittable for us to give them information, yes, but it isn't permittable for them to create a free-for-all with that information, because what we don't want to see happen is the Homeland Security to be brought into a place where it could be, you hate to say weaponized, but maybe even something of that nature, because I don't know, maybe I don't want to trust a federal organization with information we don't want them to have. So let's give them the right information. Let's let them use it for the deed that they're meant to use it for and nothing else.
Chairman Washit, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to put the good representative's heart at rest. We're not talking about a federal agency here. There's a federal agency with this name, and there's a state agency with this name. What this statute pertains to is the state agency with that name, okay? We're not talking about releasing any information to the feds. They already have access to all that information already. We're talking about a change here that allows information to be shared between the state division that maintains law enforcement sensitive records and the state agency that deals with our homeland. So this has nothing to do with any federal agency. Thank you.
Representative Brown, are you lurking around you're not. Representative Pendergraph, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question for the previous speaker. Is there a firewall between the state and federal agencies? Thank you.
Representative Oakley, are you at the mic?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and for, and I really appreciate the bringer of this amendment because we did discuss it in committee and then I don't know that it went anywhere. So thank you for following up. So these databases, in order to have access to them, you have to sign all these disclosures and say, that you cannot disseminate this information because it is very limited, very restricted information by law, by policy. This isn't something we want out. So we all agreed that we wanted, for the right instance, for our state agency to be able to access this information, but they're not really like a law enforcement agency, so there's limited reason they would need it. And I think they were even fine with, so make sure it's very limited because this is protected information, and if we don't handle it right, we could all lose our access to having it. So I think it's a good sideboard, and I appreciate it. And on and for, I support the amendment.
Representative Crago, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I appreciate the effort because we did talk about this in committee, but my fear of the way the language is written is that we actually won't be able to have honest communication between the entities that we want to have honest communication between. And so the word disseminate, what does that mean? I'm not sure for the purposes of this particular amendment. So does that mean if our local sheriff's office calls Homeland Security, that Homeland Security then can turn around and say, we can receive information, but we can't talk back to you because that's dissemination of information. I know where we're trying to get. I'm just afraid we might be putting too tight of a limit on that line of communication that we're actually trying to create. So I think I'm on and against the amendment as it's written.
Representative Brown, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I was trying to go through this and I'm looking at the bill and was going through statute, and I actually think the next portion of what we're trying to talk about is actually located just not in the red language of the bill. It goes on line 6 and it says, each agency which has that information shall take reasonable security precautions to prevent unauthorized persons from gaining access to it in accordance with rules and procedures established by the division. And then it continues on. So I actually think we're already doing this. I don't think you have to worry about adding anything additional to this particular agency. And then when you look at 1913-105, that's the establishment of the Department of Homeland Security within the governor's office for the state of Wyoming, and they have restrictions set in underneath 1913-105. So I think this language is duplicative, and I don't think it actually does anything further to tighten it up any more than it already is. So on and against.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the bringer of the amendment? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So I believe, as we're talking about this and putting all the legal minds together, this is what I will say. I believe this will do what I want it to do, but we don't know that for sure. But so what I'm not a lawyer, folks, but I think that what we need to be careful of is this. In my honest opinion, if we don't put sideboards on this, I am concerned about, I can't vote for this if we don't put sideboards on it. So I still believe that we need to pass this. We will work with the body across the rotunda from us if for some reason this isn't right and help fix it. If after we make sure we drive it out, but without the sideboards, I think it's definitely dangerous. The other thing is, from the good chairman of Judiciary, that was the first time we had heard this wasn't a federal branch, because this was a conversation we had in committee. This was a concern we had in committee. They said, we want you to put sideboards on us because we don't need to be able to get this information and pass this information out. We just need to have the ability to have the conversation of, hey, this is what's going on. This is the information. We're showing you what's happening so that you can do it. So in that, I still believe that we need to put these sideboards on. And if for some reason there is an unintended consequence, I will personally help try find that and help the Senate fix that. So with that, I still ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 145 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 145 has failed. House Bill 145, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Elleman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd?
Excused. Oh,
Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washit? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
aye.
Bear, could you please repeat? Thank you. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 39 aye, 23 no.
House Bill 145, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 145 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 147.
House Bill 147, sponsored by Representative Provenza. Unlawful trespass signage, taking of wildlife, an act relating to game and fish, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring to you third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 147 and ask for your favorable consideration. A couple days ago, we were talking about what is knowingly, how are we going to define that? What's it mean for the purposes of this bill? There were some questions about, you know, if we have a sign up on our private property, is that automatically, when this bill passes, a violation if it happens to be in the wrong spot? And so what this amendment does is try to remedy a bunch of those questions, answer a bunch of those questions, essentially say, you have to be given notice from law enforcement under this provision before it can become a crime and before you can be cited. And essentially, that's the intent and the purpose of the amendment. The other thing it does is, in the standing committee amendment, there was some language regarding prior offenses. It takes that out of the bill because that's no longer necessary with the language of the amendment that I'm bringing today. And so I'd stand for any questions and ask for an aye vote on the amendment.
Question having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 147 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 147 has been adopted. House Bill 147 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Elleman. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermueller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 no.
House Bill 147 having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 147 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 172.
House Bill 172, sponsored by Representative Eklund. Evidence preservation, an act relating to criminal procedure, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a simple amendment.
Need to move that amendment.
I'm sorry. Yes, I would like to move House third reading amendment to House Bill 172.
Third reading amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a simple amendment. Excuse me. It is intended to allow the preservation of DNA evidence for the cold cases. The way the bill is written right now, the DNA evidence must be saved, must be preserved for the shorter of 10 years or the death of the person from whom the DNA sample has been recovered, or in 10 years. So 10 years, or I should say the death of the victim, or 50 years, or the shorter of those two time periods. What happens is, suppose, I apologize for the graphic image, but there's a rape murder. And during the autopsy, there's DNA evidence recovered from the victim, but they haven't caught the perpetrator. After 10 years, it is now legal to dispose of the DNA evidence under the way it's written, because that would be the shorter of the death, or 50 years. And then 2 years after that, they catch the perpetrator, but they no longer have the evidence. So this requires the preservation of the evidence for the longer of those two periods. So 50 years or the death of the victim. That's how long you, so that way if they solve the cold case and they are able to find the perpetrator, the evidence will be there to prosecute the perpetrator. So I would urge an aye vote on the amendment.
Representative Eklund for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, this is a friendly amendment, and I would urge the body to adopt it. It enhances what we were trying to do in the bill.
Representative Craigo for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So actually what this amendment will do is take us back to the language that's already in the statute, which is based on the statute of limitations, which would be death in this case, in the particular circumstance the good bringer of the amendment is talking about. I mean, what the amendment does, what the bill does prior to the proposed amendment is say, after the data is collected, the evidence is collected, it remains in our custody, state or local law enforcement, for 50 years, or the death of the person from whom the evidence was collected, whichever, and we amended that actually in committee to say victim, but whichever occurs first. With this amendment, I think we're doing the opposite and then going back to the statute of limitations. So essentially we keep it forever. And maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I think that's the purpose of the amendment, is so that the evidence is kept longer rather than putting that 50-year, which seems like plenty of time in my opinion, to hold evidence, but it takes kind of takes the 50-year thing out of there and does sort of does away with the purpose of the language, I think, in the original bill draft.
Representative Oakley for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against. So I agree, first of all, this would like gut the entire bill. So if we're gonna do that, just don't pass it. But also in regards to the reasoning behind it, I think we're conflating concepts. So this bill is in relation to specifically to, they even call it like big victim evidence. It's medical, it is specifically a rape kit. So it's the specific type of evidence. And then, so like talking about the Innocence Project and all of that stuff with DNA, the DNA of perpetrators, and that whole is in another section of the law, 719-401 is where it starts, and DNA database created, the use of that information. So this is limited to the rape kits, as it is keeping them for 50 years, but is significant. And I think more than appropriate. I was actually going to take that down, but we're talking about one specific thing of the law. The DNA relative to the perpetrator defendant is something different. So if we want to put these sideboards on rape kits specifically, vote down the amendment and aye on the bill.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Eklund for your second time.
So, Mr. Speaker and body, this is why I'm on the Ag Committee and not on the Judicial Committee.
Anybody else for their second time? Representative Chestick for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, the intent of this is to preserve the evidence longer because of, again, the cold case. I do think it's completely foreseeable that a victim dies immediately after the rape. The evidence that is collected can therefore legally be disposed of after 10 years. And that prevents, essentially creates an inability, if that evidence were disposed of and the perpetrator is later caught, and that happens sometimes, that perpetrator gets away with it because there's no longer any DNA evidence. So it is intended to lengthen the time in which you would preserve those those rape kits. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 172 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 172 has failed. House Bill 172 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellerman. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clauston. Sorry, can you repeat? Conrad. Craigo. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Warnock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwaniter Dan. Zwaniter Dave. Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Provenza. Aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 55 aye, 7 no.
House Bill 172, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 172 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 185.
House Bill 185, sponsored by Appropriations, Local Government Distributions, Revisions, an act relating to local government funding, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Representative Chadwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the 67th, I move today third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 185. This is very simple. All it does is restores our chief executive officer's recommendation to the budget, takes it back to the 131 million of direct funding to our cities, towns, and counties. And hopefully you got to look at this little goodie that shows what it will do for our cities, towns, and counties if we do this.
Probably better drop your prop.
That's enough, okay. So I would urge your affirmative vote. Thank you.
Representative Larson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This was a JAC bill, some conversation going on, like chasing a three-legged cat sometimes when we do that. And when we adopted this in its current form, with the infinite wisdom of our great chairman of appropriations, he selected this bill to be a House bill, knowing that this body would make the corrections warranted.
Representative Larson JT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak on and in favor of this amendment. Our cities and towns have had a rough few years, and I think we should be giving just a little bit of a boost to the pot of money. Thanks.
Representative O'Hearn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On in favor of the amendment.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the bringer of the amendment? Representative Chadwick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As was previously stated, not only the state has had a rough time, so have the cities, towns, and counties. And I was a commissioner for 8 years. And from the time I came into office, our budget was 54 million. When I left, it was 48. So yeah, we had to scale back too, and yeah, it's painful. So they've been a number of years looking for some help, and this is it. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 185 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 185 is passed. House Bill 185, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strzok? I'm sorry, Strzok? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanenser Dan? Zwanenser Dave? Speaker Summers?
Aye.
Are there any changes? Heiner, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 43 aye, 19 no.
House Bill 185, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 185 has passed the House. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion passes. Representative Brown.
Committee of the Whole, please come to order. Committee of the Whole will please come to order. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a ton of bills, and the Majority Floor Leader has graciously asked me if we can try to push some of them out. So we are going to do everything in our power to try to do that. Just remember, the more we talk on these bills, the more bills fall off and we are not able to hear them. So the first bill for our consideration, where is it? I do not have my list. It's House Bill 140. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 140, sponsored by Representative Zwanenser Dan. Mental Health Care Access, Collaborative Care Model, and Act relating to health insurance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 140, Mental Health Care Access, Collaborative Care Model, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Allred, Andrew, Berger, Brown, Klauston, Lawley, Northrup, Obermuller, Provenza. Representative Northrup, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Northrup?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with favorable recommendation that House Bill 140 do pass. And here with the presenter of the bill is a representative from this very town.
Chairman Zwanenser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to move House Bill 140, ask for its favorable consideration. Basically, at the heart of 140, it's our collaborative care model, and it's It's basically an insurance code bill that puts the system of care called collaborative care into our insurance statutes. And it's basically, we have to do this to be able to reimburse it in a different way than we reimburse medical care now. So 8 states have the model already, 5 states have it in their legislative agenda this year. What it quickly does, it allows patients to get access to mental health services quicker. And all the outcomes for the 7 states that have it so far have proved overwhelmingly effective, get increased access to services, reduce stigma. It basically allows physicians to coordinate with mental health psychiatrists, especially in the adolescent space, because we have so few adolescent psychiatrists in Wyoming. We usually contract out of state anyway. But it basically also provides this kind of reimbursement accounting that allows quality outcomes. And so quickly, the bill in Section A is the definition. Section B, if you look on lines 18 to 22 on page 2, it just says this model can be used in our insurance code. That's the bill. Happy to answer any questions. Ask for your I vote.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Northrup's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 140 do pass, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 140 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 123. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 123, sponsored by Representative Berger. Collection of antler or horns by residents and non-residents. An act relating to game and fish. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 123. Collection of antler or horns by residents and non-residents. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Angelos, Burkhart, Byron, Larson, Singh, Storer, Western, Winter. Excuse Representative Newsom. Representative Western, Vice Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Vice Chairman Western?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make the motion that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report, it do so with the favorable recommendation, the House Bill 123 do pass, and I would like to hand off the explanation to the good gentleman from the southwestern part of the state.
Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you House Bill 123. Real quick, this bill delays horn and antler hunting for non-residents for 3 days. And that is in areas where there are designated seasons for horn and antler collection in the state of Wyoming, okay? Again, this bill kind of is in response to an ever-increasing amount of non-resident horn and antler hunters in our state. And this bill will just simply give resident sportsmen a 3-day head start on the shed collection season. Thank you.
Seeing no discussion and question being called, all those in favor of Vice Chairman Western's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 123 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 123 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 165. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 165, sponsored by Representative O'Hearn. Living organ donor protection, an act relating to insurance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred House Bill 165. Living organ donor protection. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Chadwick, Clauston, Hornock, O'Hearn, Penn, Trujillo, Ward, Yin, Zwanitzer. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Zwanitzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move from the Committee of the Whole rise to report it do so. The recommendation of House Bill 165 do pass or understanding committee amendments, but turn it over to the good representative from Natrona County.
Representative O'Hearn. Vice Chair O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill does is increase the donor pool as the current transplant system doesn't meet demand. The 2 closest transplant centers in the 2 large cities in the states to our south and southwest have an average wait time of 5 to 7 years. Some wait even longer if the blood and tissue types don't match. According to the Wyoming Department of Health, there is currently 160 Wyoming residents are currently waiting for a transplant. Why I bring this bill is that one of my constituents is a kidney organ recipient. She is very happy to have had 23 plus years of travel, weddings, birthdays, grandkids, sunrises, and sunsets to enjoy. What this bill does, It prohibits discrimination against living organ donors. If you look at your bill, page 1, line 12, no individual or group life insurance policy or long-term care insurance policy shall deny or cancel, deny a covered person eligibility or continued eligibility, reduce or limit coverage, or preclude you from donating an organ. The living organ donor bill, that's what it does. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Seeing no discussion and question being called, all those in favor of Chairman Zwaniter's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 165 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 165 is passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 196. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 196, sponsored by Representative Henderson, Wyoming Infrastructure Protection Act, an act relating to trade and commerce. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom's referred House Bill, I'll back up. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom's referred House Bill 196, Wyoming Infrastructure Protection Act. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Burkhart, Conrad, Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Tarver, Western. Noes, Representative Banks. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
You've heard the reading
This
of the
bill was re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 196, Wyoming Infrastructure Protection Act. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Swanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
Now I'll say that. You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Burkhart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report, excuse me, it do so with a recommendation that House Bill 196 do pass. I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee amendment and will turn both the bill and the amendment over to the sponsor.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring the Wyoming Infrastructure Protection Act because right now we don't have a reporting system in our state, in our Office of Homeland Security, to assist them with processing information related to potential threats. Currently, they have one person who's pretty much employed full-time related to cybersecurity things. And this bill is developed very closely with the executive branch and the Homeland Security Department for our state. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 is a very straightforward amendment. It's friendly in my mind because what it does is it enables the bill to be set up the reporting system, which we need right away. But it also took out the new section related to the governor, the executive. And then there's another good catch by the committee on the addition of the word "or companies," because the companies play a key role. That's actually one of the prime reasons for this. You all know about the recent attacks on our infrastructure in various states around the country, and I think it's very important for us to fill this gap in our readiness. So if there's no questions, I'd ask for the question on the Standing Committee Amendment number 1.
Seeing no discussion and question being called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 196, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So folks, if you just look at page 2 of the bill, it provides a list of the 16 critical infrastructures that we're looking at for our state. And there's two positions in the appropriations section. There's an appropriation for $203,000, another one for $5,000, which I'll cover in a following amendment. But these are very important positions to get started right away, given the current conditions in our threat climate, potential threat climate. And so I urge your favorable consideration. If no questions, I call for the question.
Representative Henderson, I would need you to move your Committee of the Whole amendment, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 196 and ask for your favorable consideration. If no question, I call for the question.
Seeing nobody rushing to the mics, all those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 is adopted. We are back on the bill. Representative Henderson, anything further?
Call for the question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Western, Vice Chair Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly do appreciate the intent of what this bill is trying to do. Protecting our critical infrastructure is incredibly important, especially from cyber attacks. But my concern is that it's too little too late. I mean, if you look at just the scale and frequency of cyber attacks and level of sophistication, especially on critical infrastructure, I really have to question if a couple of positions in the executive branch's office is really going to actually help prevent them. I mean, if we look at what's going on in Europe, and there's certain countries that are in conflict right now, the country was invaded. One of the first things that they were hit with cyber attacks was specifically their critical infrastructure. And that government has armies of people, highly trained, highly capable at trying to counter some of these types of attacks, but they proved successful anyway in shutting down their power grids and shutting down these power plants. So while I certainly appreciate what we're trying to do, I think the goal is excellent. The reality is it's nowhere near enough of trying to combat this type of threat. If we are serious, we're going to have to hire a lot more people who have a lot more in-depth and type of sophistication in countering these types of cyber attacks. You know, again, it's not just someone in their basement pressing buttons on a keyboard getting lucky. I mean, the people who perpetuate these types of cyber attacks that go after mainly our utilities and our electrical grids, they shut down power plants, they turn off hydroelectric dams, those kind of things, are highly coordinated and sophisticated actors. So I think, again, if we're serious about stopping those types of threats, which we should be, I'm just worried that this legislation does far too little and far too late. So on and against. Thank you.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't agree more with my friend from the northern part of the state, which is very beautiful. However, and I'm open to amendments on second or third reading. This is a place to start the conversation, and I think it's supported by the fact that we've had a lot of favorable testimony and support from various sectors of our state, the mining sector and so forth. Energy is the key one, though, and one of these analysts is going to be full-time looking at the most important sector, really, frankly, for our state, and the one that pays a lot of our bills. So I'd sure urge your support and move this forward, and we can talk about it in second reading.
Seeing no further discussion, sensing the urgency to vote. Anybody want a question being called? There we go. All those in favor of Chairman Burkhart's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 196 do pass, please say aye. All those opposed? No. Having failed a voice vote, a standing division vote is required. All in favor, please rise. All those opposed, please stand. More than 12. Having failed the standing division vote, a roll call is required pursuant to Rule 6-3B. The Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Element? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clouston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrop, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Sherwood? Bear? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 21 aye, 40 no, 1 excused.
Pursuant to House Rule 6-6B, House Bill 196 is indefinitely postponed. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 100. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 100, sponsored by Representative Jennings. Acquisition Value Study, an act relating to property tax. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 100, Acquisition Value Study, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Swaniter. Excused, Representative Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the motion. What is your pleasure, Chairman Harshman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rise report to do so with the recommendation that House Bill 100 do pass, and I also move the passage of the Standing Committee Amendment number 1. And Mr. Chairman, would that be okay to explain the amendment and call for the question?
Go ahead.
Okay, members, on the amendment basically takes us to page 2 on the study of acquisition value, line 10. And the committee thought, instead of specifying exactly what we want this group to study and putting sideboards on it, we wanted to leave that off and let them kind of pick whoever wins this contract to study it. And maybe they come back with 4 or 5, 6 different options. So we take out all that prescriptive language starting on page 10 through 15, and it talks about for each of the options, the following factors recommended. And then you can see it goes through the bill, Romanet 1, 2 through 7 through 8 are recommended. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, 2 things on page 4, where it says the Joint Revenue Interim Committee shall review the study required under this section and shall prepare for the legislation. We usually don't tell committees or the executive branch too many shalls. So we changed that to a may. That'll be the committee's decision. And then we changed the appropriation, Mr. Chairman. Our Department of Revenue, I think I can say that, suggested that this study will be more than 10, under 50, but we put it at 50 so we don't drive the bid process. We expect some of this to revert. So I'd stand for any questions on the Standing Committee Amendment.
Seeing no discussion and question being called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 100. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 is adopted. And Chairman Harshman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I turn the explanation of the bill over to the prime sponsor, good representative from Sheridan County.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, folks, we're going to have something a little bit funner here than what we've been talking about, recess. No, just kidding, we're not really. I want to talk about a study bill, which I'm almost never in favor of study bill, but the property taxes that we have had in the last 2 to 3 years have caused an awful lot of consternation across our state. And so I have been to numerous meetings, and the great state out there to the west of us that very seldom gets things very well right. They ran a Proposition 13 a few years back, and I've had a lot of people talk to me. This is a bill about reform. Now, it's not actually making the reform, but it's actually looking at what would it take to do that? Are there some things, it's really a bill about we don't know what we don't know yet. And so there's a lot of concern out there about our property taxes. And so this bill would look at what went right, what went wrong, because there were things that in both cases. And it's a collaborative effort between those people that collect our taxes, that department, and the county folks that assess our properties. And so all the questions on pages 2 and 3 and onto page 4 were brought about by them in a collaborative effort to say, hey, what would we need to know? What would it look like if we were to bring this type of reform to our property taxes? So that's it in a nutshell. Ask for your favorable consideration.
Seeing no discussion and question being called, all those in favor of Chairman Harshman's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 100 do pass, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 100 has passed committee of the whole. Committee of the whole, just a quick notification as well. You have exactly 1 hour to get your third reading amendments in for the budget tomorrow. And then the approval for those amendments is due by 2 hours prior to gavel. So whatever the majority floor leader brings us in, you will have 2 hours prior to that, but 1 hour to submit them to LSO. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 175. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 175, sponsored by Representative Strzok. Excused absence, state fair events. An act relating to student attendance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 175, excused absence, state fair events, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Alaman, Allred, Banks, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Noes, Representative Conrad. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Eklund?
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that Bill number 175 do pass. There was a standing committee amendment. I would move that amendment as well and explain it briefly. That amendment, I move House Bill Amendment number 1, Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 175, and would ask for you to vote no on it. The committee brought this amendment trying to narrow down who we were specifically talking about in the bill. And LSO got to us afterwards and requested that we not use these names of national organizations because they're not used in statutes at all. So it was narrowed down with other language, and I think I'll let the prime sponsor introduce that and explain that as well.
Mr. Chairman,
as she explains.
Would you like to call for question on this amendment?
Yes, please vote no on the amendment.
All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has failed. We're back on the bill. Chairman Eklund, would you like me to turn it over?
Mr. Chairman, I turn over the explanation to the sponsor from the land of the jackalopes.
Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this bill is addressing the issue of unexcused absence for 4-H members. And there are some schools who are not excusing the students when they are out as they're getting ready, their livestock ready, or even going to different, say like down to, stock shows and other things, and they're not excusing them. So this is just addressing that and just asking for your favorable vote on this. Thank you.
Representative, would you like to move your committee of the whole amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I'm one of the sponsors on that. May I?
Certainly,
move-
Chairman Eklund.
I move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 175 and would ask for your favorable consideration. It changes, keeps the intent of the amendment, but limits things down to nationally recognized organizations, youth organizations.
Seeing no discussion. Question being called. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 175, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 is adopted. We are back on the bill. Representative Vice Chair Larson.
So folks, I think anybody that's raising a steer or a hog and doing that should be able and should be excused to go do that. And prior to 2021, we had in statute that the school districts had to comply with this goofy, unexcused absence language. Drove us crazy. We worked on this portion of our statutes for about 4 years. Started in tribal relations, ended up a couple of years in education. We finally got it done. And what we said is it really is schools are local control. If you're in an ag community, you ought to have a school board that is saying, school board, our policy is that if somebody is going to be involved in one of these, that's an excused absence. Might be that you excuse them, go elk hunting. I don't care, but that's a local decision that they get to make. And so we changed the language, as you see in there, that it says that a pre-approved absence approved by the school board. And so the school board should be addressing this stuff. But what we're doing here now is we're putting back in this unique, and we're saying, but we're going to tell them that if it's an agricultural event, it has to be excused. Okay? I don't know that we want to get into these specifics. If it's a hunting event, they should be excused. Let the local school boards decide this. Is this the worst thing? So I would encourage a no vote.
Chairman Swanitzer.
Thanks. Similar concerns, Mr. Chairman. And we already actually let them have an excused absence in statute if they are showing at the state fair. What the amendment does is says if they're in events associated with participation. I don't know exactly what that means, but it basically says during state fair, every kid can get out of school, and I'm not sure that's the intent. So if you look in the statute already, if they're participating in the state fair as an exhibitor, they've won the county fair competition and they're going, that's an excused absence we count as a district co-curricular activity. But just to go to state fair and get out of school, this is a step too far in my opinion.
Representative Allemand.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think this should be a school board issue. I think this should be a parents' issue. And if the parents okay it, it's what should happen. Thank you.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what this bill is attempting to get at is a situation that there's two entities, nationally recognized agricultural entities that operate within this state. One of them's Future Somebodies of America. The other is the one that has a clover leaf as its emblem. And so a lot of schools don't actually have the clover leaf don't actually have the former of those within their school district. And they have the clover leaf program locally. And so a lot of these kids go to events around the country, and the kids that are traveling with the Future Something of America group, they get excused. But the school districts that don't have that, and they have to send their kids with the Clover group, those kids don't get automatically excused. And so that's really the situation. That's what we're trying to solve with this particular bill, is so that both groups of kids, whether their district has that program or not, get to go to the same set of competitions, and get excused from school. And so I think that's the intent. I'll leave it up to the bringer of the bill, but I'm pretty sure that's what she's trying to get at. And so I'm on in support.
Vice Chairman Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'm hearing a lot sounds like an awful lot like a local control issue. I would point out that the Good Country lawyer and where his interests may lie and his school district may lie and others don't. So I don't really care if we're talking clover leaves or future agriculturalists or things like that, because that's exactly what the local school boards are supposed to parse out. So to me, that was a good example of the reason why this should be done locally, whether it's urban or rural or otherwise. I urge a no vote.
Representative Larson, Vice Chair Larson.
Thank you. And folks, just a little more history. This state fair component was always in there, that they were excused if they went to the state fair. This is actually broader to the good member of judiciary. During the course of the year, these kids may be out showing their livestock animals across the hinterlands and have to leave. And the problem that we've had since we changed this is we just have to get some of these school boards off dead center and approve it. Now, we've got this example where the good sponsor of the bill's from. Early in the year, we had one up in the basin where the bighorns are at, and we visited with the superintendent, and they says, oh, yeah, I guess we could. Well, yeah. So I think it's going back, educating persuasively or forcibly. We just passed a bill that says we can use force, and get them to recognize that these are important events. They should be excused. If the parent thinks that this is important to their kid, why should this not be excused and go? They're probably learning more than they are out there. So I just don't, I think the intent is right, but I think the mechanism's already there to require the school board, to get your school board to allow these to be excused absences.
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because we are in a hurry, I'll cut this short. Just working in a district for 15 years, it's a very precarious situation to be excused or unexcused. People can get into a lot of trouble for truancy and things like that. So what I read this to say is that this is telling the school boards to define unexcused, habitual truant, and willful absenteeism so that they do that locally. So I would ask that you vote aye on this amendment. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion and question being called, all those in favor of Chairman Eklund's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 175 do pass, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? House Bill 175 is passed Committee of the Whole. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 180. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 180, sponsored by Representative Davis. Brucellosis testing, notification requirements, an act relating to agriculture. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 180, brucellosis testing, notification requirements. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Alaman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
Chairman Eklund, hold on just a second. Majority Floor Leader, you have an announcement?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so that everybody's kind of caught up, because I've had some folks come to me and say that maybe they're not quite getting all the updates as quick as they had hoped, and so you should be. Everything's working good, but I will give you the list so that everybody knows exactly where we're headed until I change it. Okay, we're on 180 right now. Next bill will be 213. Next bill will be HB 27. and then HB 52, HB 286, HB 195, HB 171, and because of my great confidence in Chairman Brown, 229, and then 239, 183, 127, and 38. And as that changes, I'll give you some more. I've got more here, but if we can get a little further, I'll give you some more.
And I'll repeat that back for everybody one more time. House Bill currently on 180, going next to 213, 27, 52, 286, 195, 171, 229, 239, 183, 127, and 38. Now, you've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Eklund?
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that Bill 180 do pass. There is a standing committee amendment, and I'll move that. I move standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 180, and I'll turn the explanation over to the prime sponsor from the Snake River country.
Representative Davis.
Mr. Chair, yes, I'd like to move it's been moved, so I need to just discuss the amendment, okay? The amendment just clarifies some verbiage in there, cleans up the bill, gives us a chance to meet with the other agency that is involved with this and make sure that we have it in the correct form for application there. So I would go for an aye vote on this one.
Question being called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 180. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill before you is a good bill. It just cleans up some protocol on how to deal with a non-negative brucellosis test in the state of Wyoming and what tests that trigger this and the protocol that would occur after a test were to either be non-negative or positive. That's the gist of the bill. Question?
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Eklund's motion, though, when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 180 do pass. Please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. House Bill 180 is passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 213. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 213, sponsored by Representative Burkhart. Energy production, inventory exemption, an act relating to ad valorem taxation. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 213, energy production, inventory exemption. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Burkhart, Conrad, Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Tarver, Western. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Vice Chairman Heiner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Bill number 213 do pass. There is a standing committee amendment, and the good bringer of the bill, the chairman of Standing Committee 9, will present the bill and the amendment.
Vice Chairman, can I have you move Standing Committee Amendment number 1, please?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 213.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House members, House Bill 231 cleans up an issue that we've had for a number of years concerning the delivery of energy production equipment into one county and then installing it in another county. But I think before I go into it, I'd ask you to vote aye on the Standing Committee amendment. What that amendment does is clears up some confusing and I guess I'd call it bulky language to clarify what's written in the bill. And I'd call for the question on the Standing Committee amendment.
All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 213, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 213 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Chairman Burkhart.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So what this bill does is, in effect, it's a short bill, it's one paragraph, says that if you're temporarily storing energy production equipment and you've paid the county tax, sales tax, excise tax, in the county where it will be installed, it's not counted as property for property tax. It clarifies the fact we do not have an inventory tax in Wyoming, but it clarifies too that you have to pay that sales or use tax in the county in which it's to be installed, not in a different county. It also clarifies, a question came up, it does not include the equipment to transport energy production equipment, trucks, rail, whatever. That wasn't also clear. That's what the amendment does. And with that, I'll stand for questions. Not seeing any, I'll call for the question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Vice Chair Heiner's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 213 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 213 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 27.
House Bill 27, sponsored by School Facilities. School Facilities Consolidation. Remedy Schedule. An act related to Consolidated School Facility Remediation Schedule for Public Schools. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 27, School Facilities Consolidated Remediation Schedule. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Swanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
Chairman Nicholas.
I move when the committee whole rise and report it, does so with the recommendation that House Bill 27 do pass. I turn the explanation over to the good representative from Cheyenne.
Representative Brown.
And I thought I was fast, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, this is actually a fairly simple bill. What has occurred with this particular bill, and there's large implications behind this, but ultimately, what happened is about 3 years ago, this body and the body down the hall cohesively came together and said, hey, when we're looking at schools, we have two indexes. We have a capacity index and we have a condition index. And what we did was 2 years ago, we came in and we said, we'd like to combine that into one unified score, and we'd like to score all the school buildings in the entire state off of this one unified score. What ended up happening with that is we also gave the promulgation of rules to the School Facilities Commission. And when the School Facilities Commission came in, they promulgated rules that really didn't align with what the intent of the legislature was. And so in that process, instead of going back and saying, well, School Facilities Commission, repromulgate those rules, redo this, we're going back to what we've done in the past, which is we're going to have two different indexes, that capacity index and the condition index. And that's all we're doing here is removing that single unitary index that is not going to be utilized. It really doesn't give us the information that we're looking for. We're just trying to put that out of the way and bring it back to having two different indexes. So with that, that's really what this bill is doing. Pretty simple, just cleaning up a mess that we created 2 years ago.
I'm gonna have to find it up here. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the House Bill 27 do pass, signify by saying aye. All those opposed? House Bill 27 passes the Committee of the Whole.
Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 52. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Mr. Chairman, can I request 52 be moved down the list? Only because I was recently made aware that I'm covering the bill and that it was up in two more bills. So if I could move it down a couple more, I would be appreciative.
Seeing no objection, we'll move that down. The next bill for our consideration will be House Bill 286. Reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 286, sponsored by Representative Nicholas. ETS consolidation, an act relating to the administration of government. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 286, ETS consolidation, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Burkhart, Conrad, Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Tarver, Western. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Burkhart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rise to report, it do so with a recommendation that House Bill 286 do pass. I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee amendment and turn both the bill and the amendment over to the good Chairman of Appropriations.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a 35-page bill, but it is very simple. It truly, so all this does, we now have the ETS, that's the, our entity who does all of the computers for the state of Wyoming, right? It's our ET network. It's called the Enterprise Technology Services. Back in 2012, we took it out of ANI, which is our, and put it into its own department, so its own agency. So the good chief executive downstairs, after having 4 or 5 chief executive or executives of this office in the past 5 years, and continual problems with how it's being managed and how it's being operated, has asked us to take it out of its own independent agency and bring it back and put it underneath ANI again. And so that's the gist of this bill. And so 99% of this bill is repealing the current statutes that put this into an independent agency, and all the ones that are relevant pulls them back out and repeals them, puts them into this new statute, basically puts the head of the department at the head of the division within ANI. And then all the responsibilities that are listed in the department are repeated in these pages. There's a few changes in here that I can walk through, and those changes are just to update it because they do a few things differently now than back in 2012. But this is at the behest of our chief executive, and he believes that there are real issues going on currently and over the past few years in ETS. And I can speak to that because ETS has been reporting to appropriations off and on since it was created. And so repeatedly, we have called in the director in front of us and said, here's our goals, here's our objectives, here's what we want you to accomplish. And every time it just kind of tumbled out the door, and basically the customer service has been, even as of today, it's not that great. Almost all the agencies out there say that they don't believe they had as good a service as they used to have, and that their response times are 2 days just for any complaint when their computer doesn't turn on for some reason. And so it's not being a customer-driven entity. And so that the goal is to change that. And the idea of how to change it is to basically bring it under ANI and have a closer monitoring supervisory role, and to make sure that this is a customer-oriented intra-agency, because their job basically is to help all the other agencies and make it work. What happened in 2012, by the way, well, let me go back. In 2002 is when we created the Chief Information Officer. He had 2 or 3 employees underneath him in the agency. 2006 is the IT component of ANI really got up and rolling, but they only did the smaller agencies because when it was back then, the large agencies had their own IT people within their agencies. And so when they consolidated in 2012, basically they reached out, took most of the IT people out from each agency, thinking that if they centralized, they could get better caliber work, more work done, all those things by centralization. Well, in point of fact, we don't know if that ever really occurred. And there are still lots of agencies that wish like heck they could have those people back in their offices. That doesn't happen in here, but hopefully the benefits of centralization will be realized by giving them an opportunity to kind of reorganize from the ground up on how they provide their services And this is the process that they're going to do it. So with that, I'll quickly do a page turn. So you have and if you read the first 2 pages, that's just an explanation of what they're doing. And it's what I just explained to you. So the first is basically like a preamble describing what this process is and how they did it. Then if you go to page 4, that comes from the previous statute that was when it was its own department, and that's just the definitions, and definitions are just repeated. So that takes you through page 6. Then that's the duties of the chief investment officer. Once again, that's just repeated from the existing statute. Same thing on page 7, page 8. That's all repeat language. From 2906, you're going, which is 9-2-2906 was the old statute, which is now repealed. Then if you go to page 10, that's just addressing the Attorney General's office, University of Wyoming. Then if you go down, next page is how they coordinate with WYDOT. They don't actually do WYDOT work, but they coordinate with them just to make sure that they can work together. Once again, you keep going, it's still, all the next 5 pages, 6 pages are all 2006, or statute 9-2-2906, just repeating, once again, the same responsibilities going into this new division within A&I. That continues all the way to page 22. And then when going forward here is just changing the name. After that, basically, we're just going through the statutes and walking through, so it's no longer the Department of Enterprise Technology, it's the division. And so basically, that's just communicating language to implement the change. That continues all the way to 27. And then, actually, that goes all the way to almost the end of the document. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain questions, except from Representative Brown.
Chairman Nicholas, I'd like to remind you, no personal names, please. And for the edification of the chair, did you move the standing committee amendment? It was moved. Okay, thank you very much.
It has been moved.
Has been moved.
And by the way, the explanation of the standing committee amendment it was just one component that they left out, and they just stuck it in. The question on the amendment.
Question on the standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 286. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 286 is adopted. We are back on the bill. Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm not saying that I don't like this bill, but I am certainly not saying that I like this bill either. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the ebbs and the flows of centralization and decentralization of government. We tried in 2012 to centralize technological services in our state government. What we've seen is that does not work as well as what we thought it would. What I'm concerned about with this bill, and what I heard through the explanation, and I certainly do agree with the explanation, that we've had a hard time retaining somebody of high quality talent and that can manage an entire enterprise of the 8,000 employees that we have in state government and all of the data and all of the utilities that goes along with that. I am personally not convinced that moving this agency underneath another division, or as a division underneath the other agency, is going to fix that problem. Now, that being said, I'm also not going to fight this bill and say that this is a horrible idea, because I recognize that it would be an incredible encumbrance on our entire state agencies to try to bring it back the other way, which is the way that, in my opinion, it should be, which is to put these individual IT people back within their agencies. They're subject matter experts in their agencies and everything along those lines. What I'm concerned about is that we're moving them underneath the Department of Administration and Information, and I feel like that agency has grown in scope and has a lot of authority over these other agencies. That is my biggest concern with this bill, is what that ultimately will look like for these other agencies as they go forward. And I think that we need to be very careful that if we're going to authorize this push to A&I, that we understand the repercussions that that may cause us in the future. My question directly to the chairman is, was there consideration when this bill was drafted of taking this entire agency and disbanding it and moving people back into their original agencies? And if so, why was that not brought forward as opposed to this?
Any other discussion? Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I think. And to the good Chairman of Appropriations, I just have one question for clarification. A lot of this seems really familiar and goes along with the discussions from yesterday. Is this bill also considered in part or whole in the supplemental budget? Thank you.
Any further discussion? Chairman Nicholas.
So the answer is, first of all, obviously, the decision on doing this is really, and it should be within the executive branch, and to mull over the pros and cons of how they want to continue to operate. And you know, it's not like I was downstairs in the process while they were going through this this process, but I did ask that same question, and the answer was, why A&I? Let's do that first. There's only really two agencies in state government that look inward, meaning that their job is to work with all the other agencies. And so if you're going to have something like a division, it makes the most sense to put that division in the agency that basically deals with all the other agencies, because they have that communication line already. Otherwise, you'd have to reinvent those communication lines. So that really is the most logical place to put them. There was some feedback that from my discussions of putting certain portions of these folks back into the agencies. The problem is that was 10 years ago. A large majority of the staff have turned over since then, and frankly, IT has changed substantially since then. And so, you know, they're working from the ground up basically with this new project, with the new folks. And so it really does, for efficiency and for the ongoing operations of government and for snow falling from the roof, to keep it the way it is and work from the A&I and working out. Now, if it is unsuccessful, if we still have the same problems a year from now or 2 years from now that we've experienced the last 4 years, then by all means, we probably ought to go back to the old way. But it's changed a lot since then. So hope that answers the question.
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the good Chairman of Appropriations, maybe you didn't hear my question because you were talking. Yeah, somebody had your attention. I was just wondering, I remembered a lot of the conversation that you just went over. So for a point of clarification, is this bill that we're looking at, is it in part or in whole in this supplemental budget? Because I know it seemed like there was a lot of the same conversation. Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. The only thing in the supplemental budget was a computer system and that we brought out, that was brought into appropriations to help finance certain specific projects in ETS. So that will move forward, but it will be on the auspices now. It won't be ETS. It will be under the division. And so other than that, there is no correlation between the supplemental budget and this bill and the transfer.
Sensing the urge to vote and question being called, there we go, thank you. All those in favor of Chairman Burkhart's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 286 do pass, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 286 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 195.
House Bill 195, sponsored by Appropriations, American Rescue Plan Act, Appropriations, Amendments, an act relating to the emergency expenses of government. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 195, American Rescue Plan Act, Appropriations, Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the Committee of the Whole Rise and Report. It does so with the recommendation that House Bill 195 do pass. I'll turn the explanation of the amendments and the bill over to the good representative from Fremont County.
Chairman Nicholas, would you please move the Standing Committee
I
amendment?
will, Mr. Chairman.
I would move the Standing Committee amendment.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move the House Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 195 and give an explanation if I may. Folks, before we get into the bill, I just want to, we've made some adjustments based on some things that have happened with the funding and the funds spent. So what we do on page 12 of the bill is we delete section B and renumber it. We go down, there's a program that was part of this new funding of the second round of ARPA funding that was originally put under Workforce Services. It should be under Department of Family Services, and so that was a change we made on page 23. Page 26, you'll recall last year that we put $21 million out of the LSRA to fund an irrigation tunnel project up in, that's very important, and the other half of that funding is our neighboring state to the east. They funded their part with ARPA dollars. We've got our LSRA dollars in play. We're saying in this section, if there's any ARPA dollars left, we'll swap them out, still fully fund that project, but just swap ARPA dollars out for general fund dollars. So that's what we do there. Section 7, we say that this bill is precedence. There's some other bills out there that sometimes when you've got funds from the same pot being, as you've heard in the budget bill, we'll say one bill, if this bill fails, then this goes away or this bill takes precedence. And we're using the last year's ARPA bill and the actions we do this year as a precedence on the ARPA funds. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for question on the Standing Committee amendment.
Question being called on Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 195. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to go into this in as much detail as you want me to, but I'm also, in light of this, I will try and expedite it. Right now, for you to be considering for second and third reading amendments for projects that you like is right now there's $17,200,000 of money that's not committed that you can be considering. And so just want to bring that to your attention and if you have questions on some things, there's some guidance, some treasury guidance that you have to comply with, but we're happy to have that conversation. This bill is actually taking the bill we done last year, Senate File 66, and because we established the programs in there, this bill is that bill, and then we add a new section into it when we get back there on around page 12, that's section 401. So if you would turn with me to page 4, I just want to tell you where we're at on these programs, where the funds are sitting. So if you'll just follow with me on line 4, the discretionary health response, the governor turned back 45.5 million of that, and has been recommitted. So the rest of that is done. On the On the workforce program on line 6, all of those funds, that 10 million, have been committed. On line 7, the outdoor recreation grant program, we added another 12 million. The first 10 million are committed, so there's another 12 million that is available through that grant program. The outdoor recreation and tourism program on line 9 has been committed. Those funds are gone. Same with 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oh, I want to back at 12. Let's just say from 8 to 12, all of those funds in those programs have been committed. There's about, in the innovation fund, there's about $16,000 sitting unused and uncommitted. And then in lines 14 down through 17, all of those programs have been committed. You'll recall on line 18, the WISIS program, Wyoming Home Services, we talked about that in the budget and how that we made an attempt to fund it out of this and found out that we couldn't. So those funds have been reallocated. The capital improvement provider relief, that 5 million has gone, as well as we talked about the 988, the suicide prevention. That's where that money came from. That $22.1 million is in there. The mental health waiver, the first responder, those are all committed. A change on line 26 and 27, the food security program. We had allocated $250,000 to do a study. They used all but $25,000. There's a footnote 30 that brings that in with an additional $3 million of this ARPA money to help food banks as they can make application for equipment and facility needs that they have. The rest of that, line 30 is our Health and Human Services capital construction. There was 85 million in that. We've added another 30 million with a footnote to say that there's no new projects, but to just move this extra 30 million on down to try and address those others that made applications. Local government spending was at 50 million. We added another 5 in there. Those applications were due January 23rd. SLIB will be making those decisions on their next meeting on February 27th and 28th. Sewer projects, we put 50 million in there. That was used up early. We put another 30 million here, another 30 million here in to move down to the next projects, no new projects being accepted. On page 5, line 4, 5, and 6, those have been done. On line 9, the Connect Wyoming, that was 25 million to be as matching funds. That's not been expended yet, but it's been committed for when the IIJA funds come out for, and that is for broadband expansion. And then on line 12 was to the Supreme Court for some PP&E, and they're going to reuse the remainder of that money to as they look at some ways to divert the judicial system, how they approach mental health diversions. So that's our old programs. If you would shift with me now over to page 21. These are the new programs that JEC worked on with some of those funds that that the governor reallocated when he turned back that 45 million. Put 5 million. So when we done the behavioral health redesign with community mental health centers, we had anticipated and had indicated legislatively that we would need $5 million to get that stood up. That'll be done in this next July. That will be out of this fund and backstopped with the general fund. It'll be one time. We also have had an ongoing challenge between the Department of Education, Department of Family Services, and Department of Health with our adolescent kids. Some of these kids I mentioned to you on the budget that have high behavioral needs, and sometimes we don't have the facilities in the state to take them, or the facilities that will take them in state or out of state. It's more expensive than our funding model, so we've put aside $4 million here to help augment and help take care of those adolescents so that they're not languishing someplace that they shouldn't be. Line 12 is the new workforce service program. And then on line 13 was a program brought to us by the Department of Family Services and Department of Workforce Services to help stand up, kind of like the CLIMB program that we have here in Cheyenne and well across the states, that helps the difficult to employ people get employed. And then some funds to move the drug courts over to the judicial branch, and those will only be available if Senate File 23, which does the same thing, passes. So, folks, those are the programs that are out there that have money committed to them. And again, I think the bottom line that you may want to consider is that there's still some money out there for your communities and for things that are important to you, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Representative Ord.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on and against this bill. Federal money was just used as a reason to not give our citizens medical freedom, and we want to take more of it? I don't think so. Thanks.
Vice Chair Larson. Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I look at the fiscal note on this, we've got $45 million to go into the Office of Governor, $12 million to state parks and cultural resources, $65 million to state land to the SLIB. How do these items in this bill relate to what we're talking about in the budget bills already? Is this then above and beyond additional to what we're talking about and discussing and amending in the budget bill? This to me seems like we're either front-loading or back-loading, depending on the way you look at it, additional money into a budget bill that we're going to spend additional money on. So I'm curious how this relates to House Bill 1. Thanks.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's really a good question, because last year when the ARPA monies were made available, the question that we had was how do we, in the most transparent way, allow the body to see what funds are where? And we elected at that time to keep the ARPA funds in its own bill. And the budget bills is general funds, the traditional funding of state government. So the funds that we're talking about today are funds left over from that original, it's not an appropriation, but that distribution that we received from the federal government that has been uncommitted and available to use in these various programs.
We have a committee of the whole amendment. Chairman Harshman. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I filed this committee of the whole amendment number 1 just to kind of give you.
Chairman Harshman, would you mind moving that amendment,
I'd move
please?
that amendment, and then I'll withdraw it here shortly. Mr. Chairman, is that okay? So I'd move amendment number 1. Members, I just want you to see this because we got a tremendous opportunity in front of us, and I don't want to take a bunch of time because all these bills over here are dying. Many of them are mine, and many of them are yours. And so we'll probably keep moving this bill back a little bit so we can get more bills in the pipeline. But Mr. Chairman, this 10 million we've been trying to, because we only train pharmacists and nurses in this state. And so I've spoken with several trustees, the dean of the College of Health Sciences, largest hospitals. So I just want to give you advance notice this is coming on second reading. And we can really provide some health care to our rural areas. These are good jobs and train these people in our state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, respect for our time, I'm going to withdraw this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Zwanitzer.
I would just say for a point of order, once you move an amendment, you're not allowed to withdraw it without a vote except for delete the enacting clause. Otherwise, everyone would get up here and talk about stuff and then delete their amendments. So we'd just be
Thank you,
careful
Chairman
about that.
Zwanzer. Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 195 do pass, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 195 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 52, if Chairman Zwanitzer is available. Yes, so the reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 52, sponsored by Management Council, Revisers Bill, an act relating to the revision of statutes and the other legislative enactments. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 52, Revisers Bill, respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Burkhart, Byron, Larson, Newsom, Singh, Storer, Western, Winter. Representative Newsom, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Vice Chairman Western?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 52 do pass. And I believe there are no amendments, and I'd like to turn over the explanation to the good gentleman from the capital city.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So ladies and gentlemen, this is House Bill 52, belovedly known as the Revisers Bill. And so just a quick explanation for the new members. Every year as LSO goes through our statutes, they find little technical corrections, errors, places where we need to subtract a citation or fix a statutory citation. And so you'll see throughout this bill, I think there are 24 different corrections they found over the past year. I'm happy to talk about any one of them in depth if you'd really like, or I have the sheet on my desk that gives you an explanation on each one. So ask me any questions you would like. At this point, I would like to move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1. And so while we've been busy looking at statutes, LSO did find yet another citation in regards to the LSRA in 921014. It just said the legislative stabilization account. We want to make sure it says reserve. So that is the Committee of the Whole Amendment under my name. I'd ask for your adoption and vote aye.
Well, I don't think he can call for that, so let's go ahead. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment to number 1 to House Bill 52, please say aye. Aye. All those against, no. House Bill, or Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has been adopted. Back to you, Chairman Zwanitzer.
And again, Mr. Chairman, the agreement on the Revisers Bill is none of these are substantive policy changes except for some citation fixes that reference the wrong statute. So nothing in here should be new policy. It should all be technical corrections. We put it all in one giant bill and move it through every session. Please vote aye.
Question being called. All those in favor of Vice Chairman Western's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 52 do pass, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 52 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 171.
House Bill 171, sponsored by Representative Byron. Notice of state land leases and local opportunities, an act relating to state lands. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 171. Notice of state land leases and local opportunities. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Burkhart, Byron, Larson, Newsom, Singh, Storer, Western. Noes, Representative Winter. Representative Newsom, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Vice Chairman Western?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report it, do so with the motion that House Bill 172 do pass. I'd also like to further move Standing Committee Amendment number 1.
Can I have you correct your statement to House Bill 171, please?
171. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to turn over the explanation of the amendment in the bill to the good gentleman from where the mountains are sharp.
Can I also have you move the amendment, please?
Mr. Chairman, I already did, but I'm happy to do it again. I'd like
Please
to
do.
move
Thank you.
Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 171 and turn over the explanation to my good friend from the northwest part of the state.
Thank you. Representative Byron.
Thank you, Chairman. Good people, with this amendment, I'm going to talk about both today. really quickly. With this amendment, it's a big, long bill right now, but it simplifies it to a good little bill, as one of our friends says, makes it a 2-page bill. The amendment simply requires, it changes the bill and simply requires a 30 days notice on the website of State Lands and Investments, in newspapers of general circulation, in county or counties where the state lands are to be leased, and to current lessees of the land and owners of adjoining lands by certified mail, when there's an intent to initiate a request for proposals for the lease of industrial, commercial, residential, and recreational purposes. So a 9-page bill gets turned into about a page and a half. So with that, that was quick. It's a big piece of document, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Question being called on the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 171. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has passed, and we're back on the bill. Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Vice Chairman Western's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 171 do pass, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. House Bill 171 has passed Committee of the Whole. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 229. The reading clerk will read the bill. We're moving too fast now, guys.
House Bill 229, sponsored by Representative Larson J.T., electronic payment of sales and use taxes, an act relating to sales and use taxes. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 229, electronic payment of sales and use taxes, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Swaneter. Excuse Representative Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you. I move the committee whole rise and report does so with the recommendation that House Bill 229 do pass, and I turn the explanation over to the good representative behind me.
Representative Larson.
Standing committee report I needed to read first, but that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring before you House Bill 229, electronic payment of sales and use taxes. Basically, what the bill does is allows the county treasurers to submit their tax return to the department that deals with our revenue. And that will be submitted electronically. Right now that process is a manual process. Most of the returns are electronic to date. This also allows county treasurers to collect sales and use taxes electronically. Let's say I bought a vehicle, I could just pay that online. There is a few amendments, but there is a standing committee amendment, so I don't know if I have the authority to move that. Okay, I move standing committee amendment.
Representative, I'll actually have Chairman Nicholas move Standing Committee Amendment number 1.
I move standing committee number 1. I'll turn the explanation over to the good representative who was just talking.
Representative Larson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 appropriates $228,000 from general fund to help with IT dollars for the department that deals with our collection of revenue for IT dollars that will help them set up this process for treasurers to submit the taxes. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Question being called. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 229, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Would you like to move either, go ahead with your Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 on House Bill 229. Ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this just deals with a concern from the treasurers. So I added, after the amount of sales tax has been determined by the county treasurer, when someone purchases a vehicle, the treasurer has to do some calculations to put the money in the right places. So basically it allows them to pay online after the treasurer has done the calculation. With that, I ask for your favorable consideration.
All those, question being called. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 229, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I further move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to House Bill 229 and ask for your favorable consideration. This just was a concern that was brought up by our Appropriations Committee, and it just addresses the county treasurer may charge a fee necessary to recoup transaction fees incurred due to electronic payments. And I ask for your favorable consideration.
Question being called on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to House Bill 229. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Any further discussion, Representative Larson? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 229 do pass, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. House Bill 229 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 239. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 239, sponsored by Representative Singh, vehicle idling, decriminalization, and act relating to motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your Committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 239, vehicle idling, decriminalization. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Burkhart, Conrad, Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Tarver, Western. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Burkhart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report, it do so with a recommendation that House Bill 239 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I turn the explanation of the bill over to the good representative from the capital city.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do move House Bill 239, and I ask for your favorable consideration. What this deals with is vehicle idling, decriminalization. As of right now, according to our statutes, it is illegal to leave a vehicle idling unattended, and the ramifications for that are located in 31.5.1201, which would be a $200 fine and a misdemeanor for your first offense. Everyone is affected by this as long as you're on a public road. But particularly delivery drivers and diesel drivers, anybody who wants to warm up or cool down their vehicle is limited by this current statute. It was passed in 1955 with the Uniform Act regulating traffic on highways, Senate File 125. And in 1955, the technology for remote start didn't exist yet, nor was air conditioning a normalized installment in your vehicles. So I believe that we can do the citizens of Wyoming a favor by passing this. Thank you.
Speaker Pro Tem Stith.
Mr. Chairman, this bill is great. It's awesome. Please vote aye. What it does, it takes a law out of the green books. We're reducing government regulation. And as you can tell from its history, it was adopted at a time when fuel gas had lead in it. So please vote aye.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Burkhart's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 239 do pass, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. House Bill 239 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 183. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 183, sponsored by Appropriations, Parimutuel and Gaming Activities Amendments, an act relating to gaming. Mr. Speaker, your Committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 183, Parimutuel and Gaming Activities Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Swanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the Committee of the Whole rise and report, it does so with a recommendation that House Bill 183 do pass. Now I'll turn the explanation over to the big representative who drives big tractors down highways.
Chairman, would you mind moving the standing committee amendment as well, please?
Illegally. And I would move standing committee number 1 and turn the explanation over to the good representative.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before us, members, is House Bill 183. It's a pari-mutuel and gaming activities amendments. And really what's occurring, and we're on the standing committee amendment, and that occurs, which I don't have in front of me, but I believe it occurs on page 4, line 3. And we delete a little bit of language there. And what the whole concept of this bill is our agency that conducts statewide investigations partners with our federal agency that does really large investigations to provide background checks for employees and individuals that are related to the horse racing industry and working in the horse racing industry, as well as the other gaming industries in the state of Wyoming. Well, that federal agency that provides those does not like broad language. And so they've asked our local agency to tighten up the language and spell out which employees we really are talking about, instead of just saying back of the house, back of the track, involved with the industry. They want to know who we're talking about. And so that's what this bill does, is it just spells out who those agents or who those individuals are. And so with the standing committee amendment, when we had the language in there that said, but are not limited to, that still leaves it too broad. And so that agency is really uncomfortable with that. So that's why we delete it. With that, I'd ask for your favorable consideration on the standing committee amendment and call for the question on that.
Question being called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 183. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 183 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Walters.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I described the reason for the deleting that language in the standing committee amendment, I also described the entire purpose of the bill. So with that, I would stand for any questions. And Mr. Chairman, if there are none, I would call for the question on House Bill 183 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 183 do pass, please say aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 183 is passed committee of the whole. Division being called. All those in favor, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. House Bill 183 has passed the committee of the whole by a vote of 32 to 23. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 127. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 127, sponsored by Representative Angelos. Healthcare facilities and clergy, an act relating to public health and safety. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred House Bill 127, Healthcare Facilities and Clergy. Respectfully report, same back to the House with a recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Chadwick, Clouston, Hornick, O'Hearn, Penn, Trujillo, Ward, Yin, Zwanitzer. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Zwanitzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the Committee of the Whole rise to report it, do so with a recommendation that House Bill 127 do pass. I would further move the Standing Committee amendment at this time. And if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I will just ask for your aye vote on the Standing Committee amendment. It takes the bill from July 1st, 2023 effective to effective immediately upon all acts necessary. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, please vote aye.
Question being called. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment to Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 127, please say aye. All those opposed say no. House Standing Committee Amendment number 1 is adopted. We're back on the bill. Chairman Zwanitzer.
And I will turn over management of the bill to the good representative from District 3.
Representative Angelos.
Mr. Chairman, House members, I move House Bill 127 for your favorable consideration. And what this bill does is it allows residents and patients within a medical facility to request a visit from their clergy member or member of faith during a health emergency. And I know that this is, actually, it also allow their legal authorized representative as well. And I know we think that our health emergency is over, but currently our state hospital has one COVID positive patient and they have shut down all visitation for the next 2 weeks. So what this bill does is it does recognize that facilities may ask clergy members to wear appropriate garb, PPE, masks, if they're visiting sick patients or specifically our patients in nursing homes, but that they can't, it does recognize their First Amendment right of freedom of religion. We had a lot of, well, I think all of us knew somebody who was alone during COVID, and this would remedy and recognize that. We worked alongside the association that deals with where sick people go, and they also helped us draft this bill. So I stand for questions and ask for you to favorably consider.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. The clergy and the other folks that you mentioned, do they have some sort of an ID that's kind of universal that they show as they walk into the healthcare facilities? And I'm not sure.
Representative Angelos.
I actually wouldn't know that for sure. I know our hospital does in where I'm from, but I'm sure that that's depending on each facility, honestly. And I'm sure some of our members that work at facilities would answer that a lot better.
Just a gentle reminder to recognize the chair. Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Zwanitzer's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 127 do pass, please say aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 127 is passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 38. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 38, sponsored by Transportation, Wyoming National Guard member referral, an act relating to Defense Forces and Affairs. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom's referred House Bill 38, Wyoming National Guard member referral, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Appropriations had that referral to them from committee number 8. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 38, Wyoming National Guard member referral, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Berger, Brown, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Wiley, Nose, Pendergraft, Smith, Stivar. Representative Brown, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Vice Chairman O'Hearn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, they do so with the recommendations that Bill number 38 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee Amendment. And I will cover the bill. The bill incentivizes current guardsmen and women to get their friends or family members to sign up. You saw a bunch of guys here today, and you saw them up here. We need to support these guys. What this bill does is gives an incentive to have your friends peer-to-peer pressure or peer-to-peer recruiting. It gives them $500 if they bring a Ascension in. They will tell us every July 15th of each year for the next 3 years how the program is working. Section 2, alpha has been deleted. Section B is where the amendment comes in. It has been appropriated or changed from $808,000 to $215,000. The appropriation shall be transferred or expended, or not be transferred or expended for any other purpose. Manning is the primary goal of getting good equipment into the National Guard. So if you don't maintain your manning strength, you don't get a good, you don't get the updated, greatest, latest equipment. I stand for any questions.
Questions on the bill? With that, we'll go to Standing Committee Amendment number 1. It's been moved. Question been called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 38 has passed. We are on Standing Committee Amendment number 2, and it Chairman Nicholas.
I think I'd move Standing Committee Amendment number 2, which is on page 4, section A now.
Yep, 2 alpha, yeah, section 2 alpha. Has been amended.
And then that, we deleted the $144,000,
Position, you change it to an appropriation.
and we changed it to, the position, delete appropriation, insert. Yeah, okay, you do it. I'll turn over the explanation to good Representative Chairman
Brown.
Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, what this standing committee amendment has done is inside the Appropriations Committee. You'll actually see another bill coming forward here in a little bit that is 2 programs, both aimed within the military department, and they both asked for a half-time position. And instead of running 2 half-time positions, we cleaned up the language in both bills, and we have since put 1 position in. This is deleting the position that was asked for in this particular bill, and in a bill in the either tonight or tomorrow, we'll explain the need for the position in the other one, but this is simply deleting the appropriation for that position and the position in itself. So I'd ask for an aye vote.
Question having been called on Standing Committee Amendment number 2 to House Bill 38. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 2 to House Bill 38 has passed Committee of the Whole. We are on to Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1. Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I withdraw House Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 38. It is the exact same thing that the Standing Committee Amendment just did, so there's no need for it.
Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has been withdrawn. Are there any further questions on House Bill 38? Seeing none, question on the bill has been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 38 has passed Committee of the Whole. I was just looking up.
Mr. Chairman?
Majority Floor Leader.
Yeah, hey, if you look at your list, it's been updated on the website. You should have these next bills on there. House Bill 156, Representative Locke. House Bill 95, House Bill 59, House Bill 209, House Bill 214, and House Bill 200.
I will say those again
House
nice
Bill-
and slow.
House Bill number 156.
Next bill is House Bill 156 for the body. The remainder of those bills is House Bill 95, House Bill 59, 209, 214, and 200. And we'll give our amazing staff up here up front just a second to get caught up.
Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 156. Reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 156, sponsored by Representative Locke, voter identification limitations, an act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred House Bill 156, voter identification limitations, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Berger, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Pendergraft, Smith, Stivar, Wiley. Noes, Representative Brown. Representative Brown, Chairman.
Chairman Brown, what is your pleasure?
I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 156 do pass. I further move the Standing Committee amendment, and we'll turn the explanation over to the good representatives from the center part of the state.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 for House Bill 156 as well. And I'm going to go ahead and talk to the bill while I talk to that, because it's going to be very important to the bill. Because for the most part, looking at page 1 of the bill, we're removing, well, let me start off with a little context here, sorry. Little context is all this bill really is trying to do is I'm looking to close some election integrity gaps, small things. So we're primarily focused in this particular case on making sure that IDs that are being used are valid, so non-expired IDs, and then there's a repealer in this bill as well. So let me talk a little bit to the amendment, because the amendment really gives you a good feel for what's left in the bill at this point. Page 1, line 4, we're deleting the requiring address verification. And then on page 1, line 9, we delete and by. And then page 1, line 10, we delete the line, let's see, we delete the entire, we delete paragraph C, basically, is what we're doing in the bill. So basically on page 1, line 10, and all the way then down to the bottom of the page, we delete all of paragraph C. Okay? And then all the way through page 2, and then, and then on page 2, we delete lines 11, delete entirely and insert expired. And then on line 2, 13 through 23, we delete the entire paragraph C. And finally, on page 3, line 2, we delete paragraph Roman numeral 8, and then on line 3 of that same page, we delete 9. So let me talk a little bit about that. So basically, the way the bill reads at this point is if you look at page 2, it reads, for the purpose of in-person voting identification immediately before voting at a polling place or absentee polling place, any of the following forms of identification provided that the identification is not expired. So the rest of that phrase is out. That entire paragraph C, of course, is out. And then on the second page, the repealers, the second 2 repealers are out of that paragraph as well. And again, the primary focus of this bill is just to tighten up. We wanted to make sure that all IDs that are being used are not expired. I know there's a lot of conversation. There may be some questions here, but I think the committee did a good job of taking out some things that might have made it a little bit more problematic, to just get us down to maybe some of the more important, just tighten up the election codes a little bit. So stand for questions.
We are on the amendment for Chairman Swanson, no? Okay. Question being called on Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 156. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 156 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify now what we're doing, because in my mind, all we're doing is kind of hurting students and old people. The only two things the bill does now, if you come in and your driver's license has been expired or your passport, or I suppose if other bills go through, your concealed carry permit, we're not going to allow you to vote. So historically in Wyoming, there's two processes. There's voter registration of you filling out the affidavit and you are a voter and where you live. And there's ID at the polls where it doesn't matter what your, historically, I know this bill took that out, it doesn't matter what your address is, it doesn't matter really anything else as long as you can prove your identity in any way, shape, or form. But it does seem weird, you know, in my case, I had a grandmother who, she didn't drive, but she used her driver's license still as her photo ID, but it expired, and she didn't have any other government forms of ID, the Medicaid card. And so it just bothers me a little bit that we would turn away somebody just because their ID is expired, even if we know for sure that is who they say they are. The poll worker, we're Wyoming, we all know each other most of the time. And the second thing is the section that's still in here is our students, right? And so this was a big deal last year, 2 years ago to the body, that, you know, we didn't get enough young people voting, enough of our high school seniors, enough of our college kids. And so we expanded that franchise that if they had their student ID, maybe they didn't have a driver's license or a passport, but we would allow them, because it was issued by a government, quote unquote, their school, that we would allow that to be used for identification purposes. Again, not registration purposes, but ID purposes so they could prove who they say they were. And so this seems to take a very big step backward from where we were 2 years ago on allowing and trying to encourage the franchise of voting for all of our population.
Speaker Pro Tem Stith.
Mr. Chairman, two questions. One is, I just wanted an explanation of what problem this is designed to solve. You know, have there been instances where this has been a real problem? And the second is there any calculation of the expected delays or other processing time where people will have, where the election judges will have to be reviewing, you know, utility bills and water bills to see if the addresses match?
Majority Whip Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe to give a little bit of background and context here. So this was part of the voter ID bill that this body worked on, I want to say 2 years ago, something like that. And it was really good work. I think it needed to happen to tighten up our elections. But I think if you look at the repealers, I think it's 22-1, 102 and all what it's repealing there, that's what defines what key forms of ID are acceptable. It included is, you know, your Medicare insurance card for older folks, Social Security, all those things that do not have your photo on it. So again, I'm not sure what the intent was, but I think we just need to be clear about this is how the bill, what the bill would do and the folks that it would impact. And I think we just got to be real careful because we are a senior citizen state. Those make up a majority of our constituents for most of us anyway. And I think we just have to be really careful about doing anything that would make it harder for them to vote. And given how engaged they are in the voting process, I think we just really need to thoroughly examine this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This helps me answer a few of these questions. So going back to some of the repealers, originally, I will admit I had a couple of bullets in there to make some changes to the Medicare and Medicaid ID, but after long discussions with several folks, we decided we needed to get those out because it's absolutely true. We do not want to impact some of our elderly folks. We want to make sure they have that ability to vote. So we agree completely. We wanted to get that out of there. There was a discussion on the validity of some of the school IDs, and that's one of the reasons that particular repealer is still in there. But the issue that but going back to one of the other representatives' questions, the issue that I was looking to address is I talked to a number of election judges who actually are doing this every day. And they all had the same issue with this issue of, there's this issue of IDs that are expired, those kinds of things. They get a lot of those IDs. It does end up creating a level of chaos in the process. And so really, for the most part, this was just me kind of looking to tighten it up from the perspective that we want to make sure that the IDs are at least valid that people are using when they're coming in and doing those kinds of things. Just making sure we're not using expired IDs, that kind of thing. Again, the repealer, we took out, we want to allow some of our elderly to use their Medicaid, can I say that? Sorry. Medicaid and Medicare cards. We absolutely do not want to impact that. And of course, we worked with the agency that works very closely with them to make sure that this was acceptable to them. So we didn't want to disrupt. And going back to one of the previous representatives did mention, going back to some of the work that was done a couple of years ago, I was familiar with some of that, but of course, I went through that with some folks, and we wanted to make sure we didn't go back on kind of some of those agreements that were made there. But that was the biggest driver. And again, the biggest driver for me pushing the bill was just this occurrence from election judges that I talked with.
Representative Trujillo.
As far as expired IDs and identification stuff, establishments that serve liquor will not serve you liquor on an expired ID. Establishments that sell tobacco products will not sell you tobacco products on an expired ID. As far as old and elderly, the lady who birthed me is handicapped, she's blind, and she's old, and she can renew her state ID through the mail with a check.
Just a general reminder to the body again, when the chairman calls on you, please make sure that you notice the chair. Representative Minority Floor Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So maybe again, some question or information on why the repealer for community college ID, University of Wyoming ID, and public school ID is still repealed in this bill. It just feels like the one repealer that's left is targeting some of our youngest voters who just start getting the franchise to vote. I'm really confused on why we're saying that they're not okay, but we took out the repealers for the Medicare card, which has no expiration date and has no photo or address, but for some reason the school IDs are still suspect. Please help me understand that. Thank you.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Voting is absolutely one of the most important things we do as a citizen. Nobody belittles that in any way. The people that I talk to, the people in my district who sent me here are, excuse me, are clamoring to tighten this up. We do not believe that many of these slight regulations, for example, a photo ID with your current address on it that's not expired, are in any way onerous. The state has gone out of its way to make it very easy to get an identification card, to make sure you can have an address on there. You can have a mailing address as well as a physical address. All of these things are very easily acquired. And because of the importance and the value of voting, it seems like it's not beyond the scope of desire of those who wish to vote to be able to achieve that. And I have to admit that I wonder sometimes if somebody's unwilling or unable to do that, how thoroughly have they researched the issues? How thoroughly have they researched the candidates? I'm on and for this bill, even what little of it is left. And the reality is, if we represent the people that sent us here, I think we need to respond to their desires and their desires to tighten this up so that we can be confident that our elections are secure. On the bill.
Representative Allemand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I'm quite sure of, that there's very few kids who are old enough to vote but don't have a driver's license. That's the first thing they get. And that's what they're worried about more than voting. Thank you.
Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I guess it's getting late in the day, but this is an important distinction here. The part of the statute we're talking about is the part that deals with the day of voting at the polling place when you walk in, right? We're not talking about registration. And the good chairman talked about this a few minutes ago, but it's very important. When you go to register, there are different requirements. You have to prove where you live. You have to show residency. You have to say, I live in this town, I live in this district, I live in this precinct. The part of the, and if we want to deal with that part of the statute, let's have at it. I mean, I think we could do that. And in that part of the statute, our good elected official downstairs who deals with elections gets to set rules and what is required to be shown on that particular day, the day of voter registration. What we're talking about in this particular bill is, what do you have to show the day you go to vote? We need some sort of proof that you are who you are. And I guess the way I read this after the amendment is really the only ID we're apparently pulling out is student IDs. And I guess if, for example, if my kid was at the university over the mountain and goes to vote that particular day or comes home to vote that particular day, wherever she's declared residency at that point, and forgets her driver's license at home, should she still get to vote with an ID with her picture on it? Because those actually have pictures on them. They're way more secure than the two that we left in with the amendment, which is Medicare and Medicaid. And so we're actually taking out a form of identification that's more secure than the one we left in. And all it's doing is when you go to the polling place, they open up the book. They correlate you to some name on that book, and you have to prove that you're that person. That's all it's doing. That's the purpose of this section of the statute. You are who you say you are on the day you go to vote. And we're pulling one of those IDs out. If we want to go in and make the registration more stringent, I'm all for that. But right now, we've left that by statute to the elected official downstairs, and we don't dictate that by statute. That's by rule. If we want to go in and put that in here and make that more strict, I think that's something, actually, it's probably a good discussion we have going forward. But I'm not sure this bill gets where we want to go. I don't think it, other than hurts our students, I don't think it does anything to further the idea of election security.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the previous speaker a lot. The ID used to register as a voter is far more stringent, as it should be, as the ID you use to confirm your identity when you go to vote. And I think that we need to remember that. And so I think if we're saying it requires an address, there's some, if they're a student and they've lived in the state for a while and are legal, they still may have their parents' address and not the address where they're living, or they may have a PO box. Some municipalities don't show an address; it's just a PO box, and the comment that if they can't produce some of this may just show that they're not engaged. Well, that's not a qualification to vote. If you're old enough and you're registered, you can vote. It doesn't matter how much you've researched, read, or anything. It's a right we all have. It's a right we all have, is to go and to vote. And we would want to encourage those people to vote. And so if they show up and they've got an ID that says this is who they are, that matches the registration, why would we discourage them from voting? I would, against the bill.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in support of this bill. I think it's reasonable to require that the ID not be expired. I'm not sure why that's controversial. Thank you.
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're repealing a couple sections. I want to just let the body know that the Medicaid and Medicare cards being valid for the ability to vote in statute, that's going to kind of delete or delete itself December 31st of 2029. So we're just kind of upping that time period till now. As far as a student ID, I don't know it's been a while since I had a student ID. I don't know what's required in getting student ID, but I would assume that A second form of ID is probably required to get a student ID. So therefore, you would already have a valid ID form. And so we're just kind of narrowing things. I don't see any difficulty with doing these two sections in this bill. Thank you. I would ask for your favorable consideration of the bill. Thanks.
Representative Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to add one more comment. I'm on and for the amendment, but in particular, dealing with the student ID, because you can have your state-issued driver's license and a student ID, and you can be an out-of-state student, it does present a bit of risk where a student could be registered to vote in another state. So requiring it to be the state-issued ID would necessarily require some questioning at the polls. That would be a good thing to ensure that we are not allowing any fraud. So on and for the amendment.
Just so the body is aware, Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. So we are back on the bill. Representative Locke.
Thank you, and let me get a little bit of clarification, because it sounds like I created confusion, so that's my fault. The way the bill reads today is the primary focus of the bill is to make sure that IDs are not expired. I think that's a very reasonable expectation in this case. We have actually removed the requiring a photo because the biggest issue was we removed the 2 repealers for Medicaid and Medicare because they do have this sunset. So that might be an issue we can address at an appropriate time. But in this process, it conflicted with us removing those repealers. So not repealing those 2 clauses. Now, in terms of the student ID, the perspective on this approach was simply the fact that these same students have the ability to have a government ID as well, be it a driver's license or be it a Wyoming State voting ID. That being said, we felt like those IDs were more appropriate for this. Again, the approach here was simply to tighten it up, but we left the Medicaid and Medicare 2 items in place, those 2 bullets in place. We're going to let them sunset as was kind of agreed to in the previous event.
Chairman Swanitzer.
Just a quick clarification. We say student ID, the statute says they're Wyoming, so it's a University of Wyoming, a Wyoming Community College, or Wyoming High School ID. So we're not having students from other states come in and infiltrate. These are offered by our own people here in Wyoming.
Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Brown's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 156 do pass, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. No. Having failed a voice vote, a standing division is required. All those in favor, please rise. All those opposed? Please stand still in the back. Having failed a standing division vote of 27 to 30, a roll call vote is in order due to Rule 6-6B. The chief clerk, please call the roll.
Ellerman. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrop. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwaniter Dan. Zwaniter Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Berger, aye to no. Allred, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 28 aye, 32 no, 2 excused.
Having failed a roll call vote, House Bill 156 is indefinitely postponed pursuant to Rule 6-6B. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
Reading clerk, will you read the Committee of the Whole report?
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 140 do pass. House Bill 123 do pass. House Bill 165 do pass. House Bill 196 failed to pass Committee of the Whole and was indefinitely postponed. House Bill 100 do pass amended. House Bill 175 do pass amended. House Bill 180 do pass amended. House Bill 213 do pass amended. House Bill 27 do pass. House Bill 286 do pass amended. House Bill 195 do pass amended. House Bill 52 do pass amended. House Bill 171 do pass amended. House Bill 229 do pass amended. House Bill 239 do pass. House Bill 183 do pass amended. House Bill 127 do pass amended. House Bill 38 do pass amended. House Bill 156 failed to pass Committee of the Whole and was indefinitely postponed. Representative Brown, Chairman.
Chairman Brown.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries. Congratulations, Representative Brown. Committee reports.
House Joint Resolution 2, sponsored by Representative Summers. Constitutional Amendment, Residential Property Class. A joint resolution providing for the assessment of residential real property as a separate property class for the purpose of taxation and authorizing subclass related to residential real property. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3 Revenue, to whom is referred House Joint Resolution 2, Constitutional Amendment, Residential Property Class, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Byron, Harshman, Northrup, Oakley, Storer, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Bear, Locke, Strock. Representative Harshman, Chairman. House Joint Resolution 3, sponsored by Representative Winter. Wild horses and burro best management practices. A joint resolution requesting the United States Congress to enact legislation and make other necessary policy changes to allow federal land management agencies and agency partners to implement best management practices for wild horses and burros by allowing for equine slaughter and processing for shipment to accommodate market inside or outside the United States. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom was referred House Joint Resolution 3, Wild Horses and Burros Best Management Practices, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Byron, Larson, Newsom. Singh, Western, Winter. Noes, Representatives Burkhart, Storer. Representative Newsom, Chairman. House Bill 192, sponsored by Travel, Wyoming Film Production Rebates Program, an act relating to economic development. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 92, Wyoming Film Production Rebates Program, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Burkhart, Byron, Larson, Newsom, Singh, Storer, Western, Winter. Noes, Representative Angelos. Representative Newsom, Chairman. House Bill 98, sponsored by Revenue, Property Tax, Homeowners Exemption, an act relating to taxation. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 98, Property Tax, Homeowners Exemption, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Bear, Harshman, Locke, Strock, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Byron, Northrup, Oakley, Storer. Representative Harshman, Chairman. House Bill 108, sponsored by Representative Summers. Sale of THC vaping devices and edibles to minors, prohibited. An act relating to children. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 108, Sale of THC vaping devices and edibles to minors, prohibited. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Burkhart, Byron, Larson, Newsom, Singh, Storer, Western, Winter. Representative Newsom, Chairman. House Bill 114, sponsored by Representative Harshman. Leasing and Sale of State Lands Amendments, an act relating to state lands. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 114, Leasing and Sale of State Lands Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Byron, Harshman, Northrup, Oakley, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Bear, Locke, Storer, Strock. Representative Harshman, Chairman. House Bill 130, sponsored by Representative Rodriguez Williams. Law Enforcement Canine Detection Grants, an act relating to law enforcement. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 130, Law Enforcement Canine Detection Grants, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Alaman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman. House Bill 154, sponsored by Representative Banks, Permanent Vehicle Registration, an act relating to motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highway, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 154, Permanent Vehicle Registration, Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Berger, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Pendergraft, Smith, Stivar, Wiley. Noes, Representative Brown. Representative Brown, Chairman. House Bill 168, sponsored by Representative Western. Innovations in Wyoming Agriculture, an act relating to food and drugs. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom was referred House Bill 168, Innovations in Wyoming Agriculture. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Alleman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Slagle, Winter. Absent, Representatives Crago, Davis, Eklund. Representative Eklund, Chairman. House Bill 170, sponsored by Representative Harshman. Public Funds, Reserves, and Spending Policy, an act relating to public funds. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 170, Public Funds, Reserves, and Spending Policy. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Byron, Harshman, Northrup, Oakley, Storer, Swanitzer. Noes, Representatives Bear, Locke, Strzok. Representative Harshman, Chairman. House Bill 174, sponsored by Representative Andrew. Homestead Exemption Amendments, an act relating to the Code of Civil Procedure. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 174, Homestead Exemption Amendments, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Bear, Byron, Harshman, Locke, Northrup, Oakley, Storer, Strzok, Swanitzer. Representative Harshman, Chairman. Rereading House Bill 168, sponsored by Representative Western, Innovations in Wyoming Agriculture, an act relating to food and drugs. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 168, Innovations in Wyoming Agriculture, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Alleman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Slagle, Winter. Noes, Representatives Crago, Davis, Eklund. Representative Eklund, Chairman. House Bill 199, sponsored by Representative Conrad. License plate decal, breast cancer awareness, an act relating to motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 199, license plate decal, breast cancer awareness, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation to do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Berger, Brown, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Stivar, Wiley. Noes, Representatives Pendergraft, Smith. Representative Brown, Chairman. House Bill 222, sponsored by Representative Summers, Colorado River Advisory Committee, an act relating to water. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 222, Colorado River Advisory Committee, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation to do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Alleman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman. House Bill 271, sponsored by Representative Crago, College of Agriculture Endowment, an act relating to the University of Wyoming College of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 271, College of Agriculture Endowment, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Allred, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Noes, Representatives Alleman, Banks. Representative Eklund, Chairman. House Bill 277, sponsored by Representative Larson, JT. Vehicle registration, e-certificate, and grace period, an act relating to motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 277, Vehicle registration, e-certificate, and grace period, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Berger, Brown, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Pendergraph, Smith, Wiley. Noes, Representative Stivar. Representative Brown, Chairman.
Re-referrals, Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, would like to re-refer 3 bills to appropriations. Committee number 2, the 3 bills are House Bill 130, House Bill 271, and House Bill 222.
Seeing no objection, House Bills 222, 271, and 130 are re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 3 would like to re-refer House Bill 98 to your Committee number 2, Appropriations.
Seeing no objection, House Bill 98 is re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Oh, we got messages from the Senate. All right.
Message 220. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading and an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 43, EMS districts, ayes 23, noes 8. Message 221. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading and an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 120, Restoration of Civil Rights, ayes 24, noes 7. Message 222. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 127, Wyoming Stable Token Act, ayes 20, noes 11. Message 223. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 129, Background Checks, Governor's Office, ayes 31. Message 224. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 132, Study of K through 12 Education Program, ayes 30, noes 1. Message 225. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 139, Unlawful Use of a Charge Card or Debit Card, ayes 31. Message 226. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 143, Wyoming Freedom Scholarship Act 2, ayes 17, noes 14. Message 227. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 152, Occupational Therapist, Criminal History, ayes 31. Message 228. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 154, Energy Authority Project Financing Refineries, ayes 30, noes 1. Message 229. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 155, Education Teacher Resources, ayes 30, noes 1. Message 230. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 167, Domestic Violence Protection Hearings, Remote Appearance, ayes 31. Message 231. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 169, State Shooting Complex Task Force, ayes 29, noes 2. Message 232. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 173, Financial Institutions, Similar Names, ayes 31. Message 233. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 176, Solid Waste Disposal Districts, Consolidation, ayes 31. Message 235. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on 3rd reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 111, Child Abuse, Change of Sex, ayes 22, noes 9. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Chief Clerk, does that clear the deck? Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Friday, February the 3rd, 2023.
Committee announcements. Chairman Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet 8 o'clock tomorrow morning in our regular meeting room to hear House Bill 241 on prohibiting sexual relations with persons in custody, House Bill 248, Vital Records Amendments, House Bill 262, Wyoming Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and if time permits, House Bill 101.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services will meet at 7:45 tomorrow in E3 to hear House Bill 245, Court-Ordered Placement Child Support, House Bill 221, Domestic Violence Prosecution Amendments, House Bill 233, Transportation and Care of Injured Police Dogs, and House Bill 143, Health Mandates of the CDC and the WHO.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 3, we have a change in our meeting schedule. It's been reposted to meet everyone's needs. So that House Bill 163 on those federal mineral royalties is going to be moved from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. tomorrow, and the meeting room is East number 1 p.m. and number 1 room, House Bill 163.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, will meet at 8:10 tomorrow morning to consider House Bill 132, House Bill 253, and House Bill 252.
Chairman Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4 will meet tomorrow at noon in East Capitol Extension 3. We're going to hear 4 bills, House Bill 203, PMFT, and the other reserve accounts repeal and simplification, House Bill 150, Early Childhood Development Special Districts, House Bill 283, Promoting Obscenity Educational Exemption Amendment, and House Bill 194, Wyoming Freedom Scholarship Act.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House appropriations will meet on adjournment. We will hear House Bill 188, 284, 270, 267, plus re-referrals, 223, 192, and if we can get to a few more, we'll do those. If not, we will do those starting at 1 tomorrow on re-referrals. We also will hear 105 and 250 at 1 tomorrow, and we will also then do re-referrals that are come out in the morning that we don't get to tonight, and we will do re-referrals on adjournment tomorrow for those bills that haven't quite got to us yet.
So just a note, all bills have to come out of committee tomorrow. So that's the re-referrals will be the last chance will be that tomorrow. So Chairman Olson.
Your committee number 7, House Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess in room 5 on the east side of the extension to consider 3 bills: House Bill 279, Voter Identification Requirements, House Bill 204, Allowable Train Lengths, and House Joint Resolution 10, Political Expenditures 2.
Remember everybody to have your budget amendments approved by 8 a.m. tomorrow. That's a hard cutoff time, 8 a.m. tomorrow. With that, you've heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. The House is adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, February 3rd, 2023.